Chapter 552. Protector General, there's no need to blame yourself. It's not the soldiers' fault that they couldn't win. Meng Shizhao and Uzun colluded with each other and mobilized all their forces, totaling more than 500,000 soldiers. If you include the peasants and laborers that Meng Shizhao used in this battle, it's no less than 800,000 or 900,000. The 180,000 elites of the Annan Protectorate would not be able to hold the fort by themselves, much less hold them off. It's not just the Protector General. Anyone else would be the same. Wang Yan immediately came over and comforted him. Wang Yan had been leading troops for no less time than Xian Yuzhongtong, and in some aspects, he had even been leading troops for a little longer. But unlike other people, Wang Yan did not take any stance against Xian Yuzhongtong, nor did he have any prejudices against him. Although Xian Yuzhongtong could not escape the blame for the Battle of Irai and the Annan Protectorate's defeat, it was also an indisputable fact. But the strength of Meng Shizhao and Uzun was also an indisputable fact. The empire's southwest had been peaceful for several decades, and everyone had lived in harmony. No one had expected that Meng Shizhao and Uzun would be so daring as to completely break off all pretense of cordiality with the Tang dynasty. Moreover, they had mobilized the entire strength of the empire from the very start of the war, leaving no room for maneuver. Let alone Xian Yuzhongtong, anyone else would have probably suffered defeat in the face of Jelifeng's breakthrough and large-scale assault. Perhaps some other commander in the army might have had the talent to defeat a foreign army of 500,000, but Xian Yuzhongtong clearly did not possess this sort of talent. And it was unrealistic to demand this of all the commanders in the army. This was why Wang Yan did not have any prejudices against Xian Yuzhongtong. General, there's no need to console me. How could I not know what sort of mistakes and responsibilities I have shouldered in this battle? Xian Yu cannot escape the blame for the 100,000 soldiers. Once this battle is over, if I am fortunate enough to survive, Xian Yu will go to the holy capital and ask for forgiveness from the Son of Heaven. Xian Yuzhongtong bitterly smiled. Before anyone else could react, Wang Chang's eyes widened, and he couldn't help but glance in surprise at Xian Yuzhongtong. In his last life, without his participation, the 180,000 soldiers of the Annan Protectorate had been completely wiped out, leaving only Xian Yuzhongtong to survive. For Xian Yuzhongtong to try to gloss over his wrongs after such a major event, he did his best to exaggerate his role in the war to be. Wang Chong had heard this sort of thing many times, so his impression of Xian Yuzhongtong naturally wasn't very good. But the words Xian Yuzhongtong had spoken in front of King Wu of Han's opening Yunnan steel had come from the bottom of his heart. Wang Chong could tell that this was no pretense. Compared to Xian Yuzhongtong's performance in the past, it was like the difference between heaven and earth. This was the true style of a responsible general. Was it my intervention that changed the course of events, or did something else happen in the war back then that I don't understand? Wang Chong glanced at Xian Yuzhongtong, his heart in turmoil. Back then, Xian Yuzhongtong was reviled by thousands of people. If he was really as responsible and manly as he was today, he wouldn't have ended up like this. Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil, and suddenly, Wang Chong thought of Zhangzhou Jianxiong in the distant capital. In a flash of inspiration, Wang Chong seemed to understand something. Looks like the problem lies with Zhangzhou Jianxiong. Wang Chong suddenly sighed in his heart. He had already understood the crux of the problem. It's easy to change mountains and rivers, but it's hard to change one's nature. Given Xian Yuzhongtong's personality, there was no way he would have changed so much. But if Zhangzhou Jianxiong intervened, everything would be completely different. Xian Yuzhongtong had a good personality, and Zhangzhou Jianxiong wasn't much worse. But Zhangzhou Jianxiong's desire for power was far greater than anyone else's. With such a major incident in the southwest, Zhangzhou Jianxiong couldn't escape the blame, and he couldn't possibly sit still. Even if Xian Yuzhongtong wanted to admit his guilt, Zhangzhou Jianxiong would never allow it. If he interfered, Xian Yuzhongtong wouldn't dare to resist, and it would only take a day for him to change his mind. In truth, Wang Chong had only met Zhangzhou Jianxiong a few times. Even in his last life, a great general like this was not someone of Wang Chong's level could easily interact with. The vast majority of the time, Wang Chong could only learn about this tiger of the Empire of the Southwest through the mouths of others. But in just a few meetings, this former Anan Protector General had left an unprecedentedly deep impression on Wang Chong. No one had ever been able to do this before. Whether it was when he had helped Yang Zhao enter the capital and contacted consort Tai Zhen, or when the old Minister of War was retiring, he had stubbornly entered the capital and sought a way to replace the old Minister of War's position, or when he had met Wang Chong and spoken to him, he had unhesitatingly given him his personal token. This tiger of the Empire of the Southwest, who had reached the age of mandate of heaven, had always had a thirst for power. The decisiveness and daring that he had derived from this was enough to make anyone sigh in admiration. In the War of the Southwest, many people focused their attention on Xianyu Zhongtong and the 180,000 elites of the Protectorate, neglecting the distant Zhangzhou Jianxiong in the capital. Xianyu Zhongtong was Zhangzhou Jianxiong's subordinate and the one who had been groomed by him. If Zhangzhou Jianxiong made a request, he would have found it impossible to refuse. Wang Chong quietly said to himself. And everything has indeed changed. The 180,000 soldiers had been wiped out, and as the commander-in-chief, Xianyu Zhongtong could not escape the blame. The only path left for him was death. Thus, he had wanted to whitewash his mistakes and shift the blame, because not shifting the blame meant death. But now, the 180,000 soldiers of the Anam Protectorate still had 80,000 left. Although Xianyu Zhongtong could not escape the blame, it had not reached the point where death was certain. As long as that was not the case, Xianyu Zhongtong was still the commander-in-chief that Wang Chong knew. The times really make men. Wang Chong sighed. It was hard to tell whether he was feeling joy or sorrow, or perhaps some other emotion. Xianyu Zhongtong was a man with a straight back, and he was also a general of the Tang dynasty. As long as there was a sliver of hope, Wang Chong did not wish for this soldier of the empire to turn into the traitor that everyone cursed in his previous life. Hiya! Taking a deep breath, Wang Chong urged his steed forward and leaped from the side of the stele, heading toward the foot of the mountain. There, Wang Chong could already see a few familiar faces waiting for him. Ha ha ha, Gongzi, you're finally here. Before Wang Chong could say anything, an azure-robed old man of 50-some years suddenly strode forward, his eyes bright. Spreading out his withered hands, he happily and excitedly welcomed Wang Chong. Wang Chong! I just knew that you would succeed, that you would definitely succeed. The old man was all smiles, the excitement in his heart evident in his words. Ha ha ha, Zhang Shouji, Sir Zhang, you truly did not disappoint me this time. I've kept you waiting. Wang Chong dismounted from the white-hoofed shadow and tightly grasped Zhang Shouji's hands. This skinny old man with graying temples was naturally the master craftsman of the Bureau of Works, the true architect of Lion City, and the greatest contributor to this southwestern war, Zhang Shouji. Although the Anam Protectorate's breakout had only begun during the torrential rain yesterday, Zhang Shouji's forces had actually broken out much earlier. I was truly worried for a long time about the Southwest defeat. Later, when I heard that young master was heading south, I immediately knew that the Empire's southwest would be fine. Young master, it's truly wonderful to see you again. Zhang Shouji excitedly said as he gripped Wang Chong's hands. It was as if he had placed all his hopes on Wang Chong. Wang Chong said nothing, only spread open his arms and gave him a passionate and grateful hug. In more than a year, this old man was clearly much thinner than when he had seen him in the capital, and his entire body seemed much more haggard. In more than a year, he had gone from nothing to a magnificent city of steel that could hold more than 100,000 people and withstand the assault of an army of more than 500,000. If not for this old man, no one else would have been able to accomplish such a magnificent feat. Wang Chong felt a heartfelt respect for this old man who was nearing his 40s. Zhang Shouji had played a major role in the survival of 80,000 of the Anam Protectorate's 180,000 soldiers. No one could deny this. You've worked hard. Wang Chong sighed. Young master speaks too seriously. In truth, the one they should be thanking is you. Zhang Shouji raised his head and looked at the young man in front of him. From the contempt he felt when they first met, to the shock he felt when he built the city, to the admiration he felt now, only Zhang Shouji understood what he had experienced. In Lion City, he had enjoyed the adoration and vigilance of the heroes of the Anan Protectorate, but only Zhang Shouji understood that Wang Chong was the true hero behind the curtain. While he was still hesitating over the construction of the city and could only see the art of engineering, what Wang Chong saw was the fate of the Southwest, the 180,000 soldiers of the empire, and the lives of nearly 1 million civilians. In the end, everything proved that Wang Chong's foresight had been correct. Even Zhang Shouji only truly understood what he was doing at the very last moment, when the 100,000 soldiers of the Anan Protectorate swarmed into the city. Those who lived high in the imperial court worried about the ruler, those who lived far away from the Jianhu worried about the people. Zhang Shouji sensed the purest patriotism of the world from this young man, who still had the slightest hint of immaturity in his eyes and brows. To the Central Plains, to the Tang dynasty, this youth seemed to have a most intense and burning passion, a passion that Zhang Shouji had never felt from anyone else. Elder Zhang, there's no need to say more. All of this was forged by the two of us together. Without you, I would never have been able to accomplish all of this. Wang Chong said. The two looked at each other and smiled, saying no more. There were some things that the two were well aware of, so there was no need to say more. The appearance of Lion City was a miracle. Its appearance had changed the fate of the Southwest. This was something that no one could deny, whether it was now or in the future. More importantly, in this crisis, it had also firmly linked the two of them together. An invisible bond had linked Wang Chong and Zhang Shouji together. Chapter 553. Young Master. Young Master. Zhang Shouji was not the only one waiting at the base of the mountain. Zhang Shouji's disciples, apprentices, craftsmen who had worked on the construction of Lion City, overseers, merchants transporting materials, and soldiers were also present. Once Wang Chong and Zhang Shouji met, these people began to step forward and offer their greetings. Wang Chong also greeted them. Everyone has worked hard. It's no trouble at all. Not as hard as young master. That's right. Everyone says that young master was in the distant capital, but he already foresaw this war. That's why he sent us here. To be able to work for the Tang dynasty, for the Central Plains, is a great honor for us. That's right, young master. If there's anything you need from us, feel free to send it. This was the first time these people had seen Wang Chong, and all of them began to excitedly discuss the matter. In Lion City, Wang Chong was a legend. And as the war progressed, more and more events confirmed Wang Chong's prediction, and these rumors and legends became more and more prevalent. Just like everyone else, the craftsmen were also very curious about Wang Chong, the mastermind behind the construction of Lion City and the crux of this war. When they heard that Wang Chong had also come to the southwest, the craftsmen had been in an uproar. Sitting behind the scenes in the distant capital and controlling everything was completely different from personally coming to the southwest of the empire. Wang Chong gave a firm nod, and as he looked at the fervent gazes around him, he felt extremely gratified. Are you ready? After exchanging greetings, Wang Chong turned his head to Zhang Shouji. Lady Su has told me everything. Now that this was a serious matter, Zhang Shouji nodded, his expression turning serious. Everything has been delivered ahead of time, but I don't really understand these things and will probably require young master's guidance. As he spoke, Zhang Shouji's expression became subtle. Zhang Shouji was a master in civil engineering, but he had never seen or heard of the things that Wang Chong had asked Su Qiqin to deliver. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Zhang Shouji wouldn't have believed that Wang Chong had such high attainments in civil engineering. That's not a problem at all. Looking at the look in Zhang Shouji's eyes, the prince certainly knew what he was thinking, but there was no need to explain these things. It was finally delivered in time. Deep in his heart, even Zhang Shouji did not notice that Wang Chong heaved a deep sigh of relief. With Su Qichin's item delivered, Wang Chong's most important and crucial step was finally half completed. "Where is it? Take me there," Wang Chong said. At the peak of the mountain, huge iron boxes were densely packed and neatly arranged. These iron boxes were all placed in a hidden place on the mountain, and they were all black. If one did not walk up close, one would not be able to see them from afar. As Wang Chong approached, he saw the insignia of the capital's swordsmithing families, sword shops, and swordsmiths on the boxes. And the most eye-catching of all the boxes was the capital's Wang family's insignia. They were indeed sent from the capital. Looking at the familiar insignia on the boxes, Wang Chong let out a long sigh of relief. This is only a small part of what Miss Su sent over. There are many more on the back of the mountain. Zhang Shouji said. "Pack." Wang Chong nodded and did not say anything else. He took out his long sword, inserted it into the gap of the box, and pried it open. "What is this?" At this moment, the eagle, Su Shiping, Su Onsuan, and the others also rushed over. Looking at the strange-looking objects in the box, other than the eagle, who already knew what they were, everyone else revealed curious expressions. Even Wang Chong's father, Wang Yan, and Xian Yuzhongtong, who had rushed over from behind, revealed curious expressions. After the conclusion of the battle with Huishu Huizong, Wang Chong had practically traveled day and night, urging his soldiers to march 1,000 li to this place. But as for why he chose this place, no one knew. But regardless of the reason, at least one thing was certain. It definitely had something to do with these huge boxes on the mountain. "These are our life-saving straws." As Wang Chong spoke, he suddenly reached into the iron box, grabbed a piece of steel, and threw it into the air. The steel piece flew into the air, flipped a few times, and then stabbed heavily into the ground, motionless. As the storm clouds scattered and the sky gradually cleared, no one could describe what the Uzun army felt at this moment. "It's finally over." Longkinba gazed at the gradually parting sky, mentally letting out a long sigh. This was just the most ordinary change in the weather, but in Longkinba's eyes, it seemed like 10,000 years had passed. "Without the aid of the storm, I'd like to see where you can run." The dark clouds in the sky had still not scattered, but they had grown much thinner. It was still a long way from clear skies or good weather, but this was enough for Longkinba and the Uzun army. As long as there was no cover from the storm, the ambushes and assassinations of the Tang people would be completely useless. It was almost impossible for them to ambush, assassinate, and sneak attack them like they did last night. Longkinba drew back his gaze from the sky and saw that all the Uzun generals around him had the same expression on their faces. Once I lead my army to catch up to you, I'll tear all of you to pieces. I'll vent the hatred in my heart." Longkinba's eyes were gloomy, his brow suffused with killing intent. In last night's battle, Longkinba had been ambushed by Wang Yan and Xian Yuzhongtong, the two highest commanders of the southwest of the Tang dynasty. If not for the timely arrival of the great general, he would have died. As a resident of the Great Snow Mountain Temple, Longkinba had always had an extremely high opinion of himself. How could he possibly endure such a humiliation? Boom! While Longkinba was in a daze, the earth suddenly quaked and a majestic tornado of energy soared into the sky. A furious voice boomed over the camp like a peal of thunder. "Bastard thing! You deserve to die." Whoosh! The air seemed to crazily surge, the majestic power contained in that voice throwing the air in a radius of several hundred zhang into chaos. Hearing Great General Huishu Huizong's exposed voice, even Longkinba couldn't help but feel stifled, a hint of fear appearing on his face. Fortunately, it wasn't me who pursued Wang Yan's group yesterday. Longkinba inwardly rejoiced. At this moment, he suddenly rejoiced that he had followed the great general and not been like the Zifidan Jiao Sero, pursuing Wang Yan with Fen Jie, the crown prince of Meng Shizhao. That bastard Jiao Sero actually lost nearly 50,000 soldiers in a single battle. Not even I would dare to make such a grave mistake. Given the great general's temper, he'll definitely skin him alive for daring to come back this morning. Longkinba quietly said to himself. Rumble. As if in response to Longkinba's voice, the distant commander's tent suddenly exploded and a muscular figure smashed a large hole through it. Amidst cries of alarm, the figure was sent flying nearly 100 zhang into the air before crashing to the ground with a thud. That sound made everyone's hearts ache, and those who were even a little closer could even feel the violent tremors caused by the impact of that person's fall. But a few moments later, Jiao Sero used both his hands and feet to rush back into the tent like an eight-legged spider. It was like he hadn't been the one who had just fallen. General, Prime Minister, your subordinate has truly encountered a formidable opponent this time. Jiao Sero's pleas could be heard even from a distance. Longkinba's heart trembled, but he pretended not to hear and quickly walked away. The decisive battle with the Tang dynasty's Anan protectorate was about to begin. Compared to Jiao Sero's misfortune, he was more concerned about exterminating the Tang dynasty and washing away his shame. By the time Longkinba had calmed his heart and was about to leave, in the distant tent, everything was just beginning. This massive tent was currently packed with people. Besides Wuxia Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen, the two leaders of the Uzun Empire's Ngari royal lineage, there was also King Jelifeng of the Meng Shizhao Empire and Great General Duan Gechuan. Jiao Sero had returned with the news of its defeat. Let alone Wuxia Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen, even Jelifeng and Duan Gechuan were stunned. Cavalry had always been more powerful than infantry, and Uzun cavalry had swept through the world with few opponents. One could say that, although Meng Shizhao had the largest army, the true main force had been Uzun's 200,000 some cavalry. Ever since the start of the war, the Uzun Empire had not suffered any major losses, a direct testament to its strength. Thus, one could easily imagine the shock that Jiao Sero's defeat had caused. 70,000 Taisang cavalry of almost 80,000 had returned with only 20,000 some. This was undoubtedly a crushing defeat. Since the start of the war, the Uzun Empire had never suffered such a loss. Prime Minister, General, this truly wasn't our fault. Our brothers did all they could, but we were no match for them. None of our men could get close to their front lines, no matter which direction we came from. Our brothers have all participated in several major battles, and even the Anxi Protectorate army was so formidable that they were beaten down by us. But for some reason, those fellows are just too formidable. In the tent, Jiao Sero was far from the only one kneeling on the ground. The other commanders were there as well. One of the officers had barely said a few words when Wuxia Huizong furiously bellowed, "How dare you? Shut your mouth." "Milord, before the Tibetan officer could say anything, rumble. An enormous energy, suffused with scorching heat, slammed into his body. Before this debating officer could finish speaking, Wuxia Huizong had sent him flying out of the tent with a palm. At this stage, you've already lost, yet you still dare to argue with me. Wuxia Wuzong's face was ashen, his rage uncontrollable. "Milord." Everyone in the tent felt a chill in their hearts as they lowered their heads. The culture of Uzun was completely different from that of the Central Plains, and Wuxia Wuzong was no gentle Confucian general. If he continued to argue, nothing good would come of it. "Great General, although this is your Uzun's family, forgive this lowly one for speaking too much, but I have interacted with General Jiao Sero several times. This lowly one has always admired his bravery. Could it be that the Tang dynasty has sent a large number of reinforcements that we do not know about?" Just when the mood was extremely stifling, a voice came from the corner of the tent. It was King Jelifeng of Meng Shizhao. Although this was Wuxia Wuzong's commander's tent, it had now become the tent of the Mengshi, Yusang army. The two sides had started a war against the Tang dynasty, and there was no way out. Given the Tang dynasty's past style, it was certain that they would retaliate on a large scale in the future. As an ally, the Uzun suffering such a large number of casualties was also closely related to Meng Shizhao. It was impossible for her not to take this matter seriously. Impossible. Before Meng Shizhao and Jelifeng could continue, Huishu Wuzong immediately interrupted them. The closest to us is Longyu. Geshu Han's Big Dipper army is extremely powerful and is the one most likely to reinforce this place. But right now, Longyu has King of Generals Witadra Konglo and Dusong Mengpoch. No matter how formidable Geshu Han is, he won't be able to free himself. And besides Geshu Han, where else can the Central Plains find usable soldiers? Although he had a crude appearance that made him seem like a brute, Huishu Wuzong had not relied solely on martial prowess to become a great general of the Ngari royal lineage and contend against Zhangzhou Jianxiong for so many years. It's hard to say. The dynasties of the Central Plains have extremely deep reserves, so it's possible that they have a trump card that we do not know about. Moreover, it was dark and raining at the time, so visibility was poor. Perhaps the Tang people had sent a large number of reinforcements that Jiao Sero and the others did not notice. This is also possible. A cold and hard voice suddenly said. That's impossible. We were at the summit at the time. The main attack came from the summit. We couldn't have been wrong. A general under Jiasiluo's command raised his head and argued. You still dare to talk back? Huishu Wuzong was infuriated. Uzun's hierarchy was even stricter than that of the Central Plains. Since he had already spoken, he would not allow anyone to disobey him. Especially not in front of Jelifeng and the others. Great General, you've wronged them. Fenjie stood against the wall of the tent, looking at the Jiao Sero soldiers wounded by Huishu Wuzong. He wanted to say something several times, but then hesitated. With his father present and Huishu Wuzong teaching his subordinates a lesson, Fenjie should not have had any leeway to speak. But Fenjie had also participated in that battle. Of the Uzun generals, Fenjie had the best relationship with Jiao Sero. Otherwise, he would not have chased after Wang Yan and the others through the rain. Now that he saw Jiao Sero and his subordinates being punished, and Jiao Sero even heavily wounded by Huishu Wuzong, Fenjie couldn't help but step forward. The Tang dynasty truly did not have any reinforcements. The true cause of our defeat was that incomparably crafty Tang dynasty youth who impersonated Wang Fu. I was there at the time, so I can guarantee that Jiao Sero's words are absolutely correct. His words were resolute and decisive, but as Fenjie spoke, Huishu Wuzong, Daluan Ruozhen, Jelifeng, and Duan Getsuan all paled. What did you say? Chapter 554. What youth? Your Highness the Crown Prince, what are you saying? A solemn voice came from the side. In the tent, the only person in Meng Shizhao who could interject at this time was the only great general of Meng Shizhao, Duan Gechuan. Although Meng Shizhao's strength was far inferior to that of the Tang dynasty or Uzun, he was the only great general who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Geshu Han, Huishu Wuzong, and Zhangzhou Jianxiong. This was enough for Meng Shizhao to squeeze into the ranks of the various kingdoms. And this wasn't even mentioning that the ruler of Meng Shizhao, Jelifeng, was a top-class expert. This was also why the ruler of Meng Shizhao was so ambitious and wanted to break free from the control of the Tang dynasty, even suppressing the Tang dynasty to become the hegemon of the southwest. The southwest only has Xianyu Zhongtong and Wang Yan, and these two can only be considered brigadier generals. And where did this youth come from? Great general truly is a youth in his teens. He wore golden armor and pretended to be Wang Fu. Jiasiluo and I were able to see this for ourselves. The army commanded by Wang Yan and Wang Fu was already surrounded by us and was at the end of its flight, but this brat seemed to have learned some sort of military art. Ever since he appeared, the Anxi Protectorate army seemed to have become a completely different army. It became extremely sharp and difficult to deal with. Our vanguard was already on the verge of piercing through them, but who could have expected that 10,000 of our men would be killed instead? It was precisely because Jiao Sero and I noticed this that we wanted to assassinate him. But we didn't know that although this brat's strength is insignificant, he's extremely crafty. Not even Jiao Sero and I were able to kill him. Feng Jia refuted. Although Great General Duan Gechuan's reputation in the Central Plains wasn't that great and not many people knew of him, within Mengshi Zhao, his word was law. Let alone Fengjie's father Jelifeng, even Uzun's great general Huishu Wuzong dreaded him. In the whole of Mengshi Zhao, other than his father, Jelifeng, who was the king, Huishu Wuzong had to show some respect. Only General Duan Gechuan's words could make him take it seriously. Great General, Prime Minister, Crown Prince Fengjie is correct. There was indeed a very powerful young man among the Tang people. Our cavalry's charge was very powerful, but I don't know how he did it. He actually made our army fall into chaos. Our own people blocked our own people, and we couldn't attack them at all. Although I don't want to admit it, in terms of the art of war, we are indeed far inferior to that youth. Jiao Sero opened his mouth as he lay on the ground. His head was pressed against the ground, and he didn't dare to move. In the tent, upon hearing Jiao Sero's words, Huishu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen immediately grew quiet. Jiao Sero was a general of Uzun. The people of Uzun were fierce and valiant, and as a result, they were also proud. It wasn't that they wouldn't lower their heads, but that they would only lower their heads to their own people, to the people of Uzun who had a higher status than them. And not to outsiders. The people of Uzun would not easily submit to outsiders, much less a general of Uzun. In front of so many people, Jiao Sero, one of the 5 tiger generals, had actually personally admitted that his skill was inferior to someone else's. This wasn't something that could be easily done. This could only mean one thing, that fellow truly was very strong. Moreover, he was far more powerful than Jiao Sero. That was why he dared to say such words in public. On the other side, Jelifeng and Duan Gechuan also fell silent. If it could be said that Fengjie's side of the story was only one side of the story, then Jiao Sero's testimony was enough to prove that they were speaking the truth. On the side of the Tang dynasty, in the Annam Protectorate, there was indeed an unknown, young, but extremely powerful military strategist. For a moment, the tent was silent. The leaders of both sides were speechless. Jiao Sero, let me ask you. You said you've seen that young man. What does he look like? Huishu Wuzong suddenly said. A strange look flashed in his eyes. He seemed to have thought of something. This, Jiao Sero hesitated for a moment, then described Wang Chang's appearance. Guards. When the Tang people broke out of the encirclement yesterday, call over all the commanders in the northeast. Huishu Wuzong suddenly ordered. At these words, everyone turned to look at him, especially Fengjie and Jiao Sero, their faces filled with amazement. Huishu Wuzong had never been the type to talk much. Since he had suddenly done this, there had to be a reason. Great General, have you discovered something? Jelifeng looked at Huishu Wuzong. If he remembered correctly, the army led by Huishu Wuzong had first been routed in the northeast yesterday, and it was from there that Xianyu Zhongtong and the others had broken out of the encirclement. I don't dare to say that I've discovered anything, but I have some vague ideas. Huishu Wuzong sternly said. A few moments later, a group of Uzun commanders who had been guarding the northeast last night and had been responsible for sniping Xianyu Zhongtong and the others immediately filed into the tent. Encircling Xianyu Zhongtong and the Annam Protectorate. You are all in charge of the northeast, right? Yes, my lord. They all spoke in hushed voices. Tell me everything you have observed about the Tang people's commanders. Forget about Xianyu Zhongtong and the others, just talk about the unfamiliar Tang people's commanders. At Huishu Wuzong's words, everyone's expressions became strange. Great General, do you suspect that the people who routed you last night were the same people who defeated us? Also the work of that brat? Fenjie blinked. Whether it's true or not, we'll know once we ask. Huishu Wuzong said. The final result came out faster than everyone had expected. After a month of fighting in Lion City, the Uzun commanders were now very familiar with the commanders of the Annam Protectorate. Moreover, the observation ability of a commander was far sharper than that of an ordinary soldier. In just a few moments, a youth who looked exactly like the one described by Jiao Sero and the others appeared in the mouths of the commanders. Just think about it, a group of veteran and extremely experienced generals of the Tang dynasty had a young, tender youth mixed in with them. Moreover, he was the one giving the orders. It was hard not to notice him. How is this possible? When the final answer was reached, everyone's expressions became both marvelous and strange. This was especially true for Fenjie and Jiao Sero. Jiao Sero, who had been lying on the ground, couldn't help but jerk his head up, his eyelids twitching. This is impossible. They had only arrived in the morning and had been punished as soon as they arrived. They only knew that Great General Huishu Wuzong's operation had failed and that Xian Yuzhongtong had succeeded in escaping. But they had never imagined that the one who had defeated them and the Great General was the same youth. How could this fellow be so formidable? Are you sure you're not mistaken? How could that fellow defeat the Great General? When Huishu Wuzong was speaking to his subordinates, it was normally not his place to interrupt. But Fenjie couldn't care less. Although Huishu Wuzong couldn't compare to the Uzun Great General Witadra Konglo, nor could he compare to the Tang dynasty's Wang Zhongxi or Zhang Shogue, he wasn't too far off. This was not a matter of pure martial prowess. No one who could reach the imperial Great General level had relied solely on their martial prowess. Wisdom and courage were the most basic requirements. Cavalry in the hands of Huishu Wuzong and Jiao Sero would never be the same. The cavalry led by Huishu Wuzong was an existence that could crush Zhangqiu Jianxiong's infantry. If even he had been defeated by that youth, then that youth's mastery of the art of war had reached an absurd level. No one in the Mengshi, Yusang army could defeat him. It's not really defeat. They just used the tactic of luring the tiger away from the mountain. Huishu Wuzong indifferently said, his expression extremely calm. If he hadn't been lured away, Xian Yuzhongtong and the others would never have been able to so easily break out of the encirclement. However, even so, the ability that the other party displayed was already quite shocking. At the very least, if he hadn't appeared in time last night, the leader of the 5 tiger generals, Long Kinba, would already be dead. The sudden appearance of such a formidable figure on the southwestern battlefield was extremely bad news for the Mengshi, Yusang army. Even people of high status like Jelifeng and Duangechuan couldn't help but frown. To think that the Tang dynasty would produce such a formidable figure, and a young one at that. This is definitely not good news for our Mengshi Zhao and Uzun. For the first time, Jelifeng revealed a worried expression. In the War of the Southwest, Mengshi Zhao had staked the fate of his country on the line. There was no way out. At this stage of the war, there was no room for any variables. I know all the famed generals, great generals, and generals of the Tang dynasty like the back of my hand, as well as all the rising stars of the younger generation. My imperial palace has even set up a special archive for them. Anyone who can reach this level of mastery in the art of war is definitely no ordinary individual, but why have I never heard of such a person in the Tang dynasty? The appearance of such a person in the southwest is definitely a disaster, not a blessing. I only want to know, just what is the background of this youth? Why does your majesty need to boost the morale of others and diminish your own? General Huishu Wuzong has already said that the opponent is only using the tactic of luring the tiger away from the mountain. Since he is using this method, he must believe that he is no match for the great general. Otherwise, why would he abandon what is near and seek what is far away? A voice came from the side. Compared to his own ruler, Great General Duangechuan's attitude was much calmer and more objective. As the only remaining great general of Mengshi Zhao, as well as the only great general, Duan would not underestimate his opponent before understanding the details, but he would also not pointlessly overestimate him and strike a blow to his own morale. The great general speaks correctly. The Annan Protectorate is made up of infantry, with only a small number of cavalry. No matter what, he will never be able to escape. Imperial Father, Great General, Prime Minister, based on my and General Jiao Sero's personal experience, this youth will definitely be a great foe for our Meng Shizhao and Uzun in the future. He's so young and already so formidable. If he matures in the future, won't he become a great threat to us? So no matter what, we can't let him escape. Fenjie's face was gloomy. That youth who had defeated him and Jiao Sero at the same time and had even rescued Xian Yuzhongtong and the Annan Protectorate from the hands of Uzun Great General Huishu Wuzong, Fenjie's heart was seething with an intense killing intent. Not even he himself had noticed that for the first time, he had faintly begun to envy another person. As the crown prince of Meng Shizhao, Fenjie had been a child of outstanding talent, and at a young age, he had been praised by the war god of the Tang dynasty, Wang Zhongxi, as a future great general. Even in the capital of the Tang dynasty, Fenjie had been one of the finest geniuses. There truly weren't many people in this world worthy of his envy. But at this moment, Fenjie was envious. An even younger and more outstanding youth meant limitless prospects, as well as an endless threat to Meng Shizhao and Uzun. No matter what, he could not allow this youth to leave the southwest alive. Ha ha ha, in truth, there's no need to worry so much. As for that mysterious youth who defeated all of you last night, I pretty much know his background. Suddenly, there was a burst of hearty laughter. The silent prime minister of the Uzun Ngari royal lineage, Daluan Ruozun, narrowed his eyes and lightly waved a feather fan in his hand. Buzz. Chapter 555. The appearance of a mysterious youth had caused the war in the southwest to undergo an earth-shaking change. The Uzun army, which had initially been virtually invincible, suffered successive defeats in the span of a single night, losing 50 to 60,000 soldiers. One had to admit that while everyone had been excitedly thinking about completely wiping out the Annan Protectorate and flattening the Tang dynasty's western front, this had given them all a rude awakening. No one knew the origins of this mysterious youth. Even Jiao Sero and Fenjie had only met him once. But now, Uzun Prime Minister, who had never even seen him or even participated in any of the battles, was saying that he already knew the identity of this youth. Prime Minister, is what you say true? Fenjie's face was filled with shock. He had heard of this Prime Minister of the Uzun Ngari royal lineage for a long time, only knowing that this youth possessed extraordinary intelligence and abilities. The punishment operation that the Tang dynasty had jointly launched with Zhangzhou Jianqiong and several other prefectures had ultimately ended in failure because of this youth. Fenjie didn't understand Daluan Ruozun, but he understood the other side, no, the capital's Zhangzhou Jianqiong. Zhangzhou Jianqiong was a man of great ambition. He had always wanted to establish himself in the southwest and use his achievements to enter the imperial court. Moreover, under Zhangzhou Jianqiong's leadership, the relationship between the Tang dynasty and Meng Shizhao had not been so stiff, and the two sides had even had a honeymoon period. Back then, Zhangzhou Jianqiong had also encouraged Meng Shizhao to borrow Meng Shizhao's military strength to ally with the two sides and attack the plateau. But in the end, none of these operations had succeeded. It was not Uzun Great General Huishu Wuzong, but this Prime Minister of the Uzun Empire's Ngari royal lineage, who had managed to make someone as ambitious as Zhangzhou Jianqiong settle down in the Annan Protectorate for several decades, but this Uzun Empire's Ngari royal lineage. I've long heard that the Prime Minister of Uzun has 9 acupores in his mind and is extraordinarily intelligent. Each of them is knowledgeable. They are familiar with all the classics of the Central Plains and have also received the secret incantation from the mysterious Great Snow Mountain Temple. The cicada feels the autumn wind before it blows, and knows the meaning of autumn when a leaf falls. I used to think that it was more or less an exaggeration. If this Daluan Ruozan can determine that kid's identity just by listening to a few words, then it's really scary. Fengjia's eyes flashed and countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Uzun had 4 royal families, 4 prime minister, and 1 prime minister. Daluan Ruozan was just one of them. If Daluan Ruozan really had this kind of ability, then the other 3 prime ministers and the one who served the Tsenpo were truly frightening. At this moment, a hint of fear emerged in Fengjie's heart. Imperial father borrowed the strength of Uzun to deal with the Tang dynasty, but Uzun himself is a wolf, and an extremely vicious one at that. If in the future Meng Shizhao and Uzun shed all pretense of cordiality, the empire would be in dire straits. In truth, Fengjie had always been reserved about borrowing the strength of the Uzun Empire to make it difficult for the Uzun cavalry to advance. Although he couldn't be considered to be vehemently opposed, he wasn't very enthusiastic either. At the very least, he was a little conflicted. The more powerful Uzun's general and minister abilities were, the more conflicted Fengjie felt. Crown Prince Jie, what do you think? At some point, Daluan Ruozan had walked over and was looking at Fengjie with a smirk on his face that seemed to contain a deeper meaning. It's nothing. Prime Minister is overthinking things. Fengjie's heart chilled and he hastily regained his composure. He knew that this Prime Minister was extremely perceptive and that his thoughts were even more terrifying than he had imagined. That brat's origins are unknown. If we can learn his identity and use his weakness to deal with him, that would be the best. Fengjie is willing to listen to Prime Minister's wise opinion. In truth, this isn't that difficult. Although I've never seen the youth you speak of, nor have I participated in any of those campaigns, I don't know how he commands an army. However, if we just want to determine his identity, it really isn't that difficult. I already know everything about him. Daluan Ruozan fanned himself as he paced back and forth, attracting everyone's attention. When it came to military affairs, one was civil and the other was military. Wherever Wuxia Wuzong was present, he rarely interfered. Most of the time, it was a matter of strategy. The art of war and strategy are all secrets of the families of ministers and generals. These are not things that an ordinary outsider can learn. Moreover, you said that he was wearing Wang Fu's armor. At this point, Daluan Ruozan smiled and continued. There are only 2 true commanders of the Annam Protectorate that Wang Yan leads. One is Wang Yan, and the other is his eldest son, Wang Fu. These 2 are the true commanders of the army. Military affairs are a matter of great importance to the country. Which ordinary soldier would dare to casually pass on the armor of their commander? They wouldn't even dare to think about it. As soon as that youngster appeared, he took the king's talisman and wore his armor. If he wasn't from an illustrious family, rich or noble, and full of confidence, how would he dare to do such a thing? Prime Minister, forgive me for speaking too much, but the Tang dynasty has countless scions who are either rich or noble. If this is all, I'm afraid that it isn't enough to deduce the identity of that youth, right? Jelifeng, the ruler of Meng Shizhao, said with a frown. In truth, she was also rather curious about that youth. However, this curiosity wasn't admiration. Rather, it was a desire to eliminate any threat as quickly as possible. The Tang dynasty of the Central Plains had far too many talents, practically innumerable. Wang Zhongxi, Ge Han, Gao Shenji, Zhang Shougue, Zhangqiu Jianxiong, Wang Yan, Xianyu Zhongtong, there were far too many. And now, at such a crucial moment, there was another mysterious youth who was extremely skilled in the art of war. With such a powerful empire by their side, it was hard to eat or sleep. No one knew when the Tang dynasty would be dissatisfied and send troops to destroy Meng Shizhao, or change the dynasty and install a new emperor. This was also one of the reasons why Jelifeng wanted to rebel against Tang. As for the dangers from the Tang dynasty, especially those that could be seen, he wanted to nip every single one of them in the bud as soon as possible, lest it grow into a bigger problem. If that's all, of course it wouldn't be enough. Daluan Ruozan chuckled. But Huishu Wuzong also said that the commanders of the army last night were not Wang Yan or Xian Yuzhongtong. It was not their style to work together to launch a sneak attack on Jiao Sero. To be able to command both Wang Yan and Xian Yuzhongtong at the same time, just think about it. Who else could do that? Everyone fell silent. Huishu Wuzong and Jelifeng both sank into deep thought. None of them had considered what Daluan Ruozhen had just said. Even Fenjie and Jiao Sero were dumbfounded. In fact, in terms of curiosity, in terms of wanting to know more about that young man, no one was more eager than them, who had been defeated by him twice. But they really hadn't thought about what Daluan Ruozhen had said. Wang Yan is still secondary, but Xian Yuzhongtong is someone that fellow Zhangqiu Jinxiong chose. That fellow only looks at loyalty. Wang Yan might hand over his military authority, but Xian Yuzhongtong definitely won't hand over his authority so easily. Unless... Wang. It was as if a beam of light had flashed through everyone's mind, and their minds suddenly became clear. Unless that person was appointed by Zhangqiu Jinxiong. In that instant, the same thought flashed through everyone's mind. That's right. Why would Xian Yuzhongtong hand over his authority in such a short period of time? And why would he listen to that youth and work together with Wang Yan to ambush Jiao Sero? In this world, it's not that there aren't people who can order Xian Yuzhongtong around and make him humble himself. But there are definitely only a handful of them. And Zhangqiu Jinxiong is definitely one of them. I dare say that child definitely has a letter from Zhangqiu Jinxiong. Daluan Ruozhen waved his fan, his last words resolute and decisive. As soon as he finished speaking, the room became deathly silent. At this moment, even the emperor of Mengshi Zhao, Jelifeng, was speechless. Daluan Ruozhen had never even met the other party, but from a few words alone, he had deduced that the other party had a letter from Zhangqiu Jinxiong. And yet, even Jelifeng felt that what he had said was probably true. But how could Zhangqiu Jinxiong hand over his letter to someone else? That fellow has a suspicious personality and would never easily hand over his authority to someone else. On top of that, given how formidable the other party is, to be able to force Zhangqiu Jinxiong to hand over the letter to him, how could we have never heard of him before? This is where things get interesting. A bright light shone in Daluan Ruozhen's eyes. In his view, there were no longer any variables that could change the outcome of the war in the southwest. Last night's battle had only been a coincidence. The torrential rain, the darkness of the night, and the fact that the Mengshi, Yusang army had not arrived at the same time had resulted in this outcome. But in the end, the fate of the Annan Protectorate had already been decided from the very start. What he was interested in now was this mysterious young man who had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Who says that we haven't heard of him? It's just that your majesty might not know of him. Of course, Zhangqiu Jinxiong wouldn't hand over his letter to someone else, let alone have Xian Yuzhongtong voluntarily hand over his authority. But if it's someone who's close to Zhangqiu Jinxiong and has the same interests, then there's no problem. For example, the Wang clan, or Wang Yan's youngest son, or the person who built Lion City. Boom! Daluan Ruozhen's final verdict was like a stone stirring 1,000 ripples. Everyone felt as if a fierce gale had swept through them, their minds raging with great waves. Even Huishu Wuzong's heart was in turmoil. Not many people knew about the youngest son of the Wang clan, but the person who had built Lion City and given Mengshi Zhao and Uzun such a difficult problem had already become a household name. Fenjie and Jiao Sero, who had already met Wang Chong, were even more shocked than anyone else. Chapter 556. The one who had caused the most trouble was not Wang Yan and his son, who had suddenly appeared out of nowhere and led an army into the city. It was Wang Chong, who had constructed Lion City. At the very start, the Uzun people had also ridiculed the Mengshi Zhao people. But after witnessing the formidable defensive capabilities of Lion City and experiencing its position on the Arai Plains and in the southwest of the Tang dynasty, no one dared to ridicule the Mengshi Zhao people any longer. The Uzun people did not have much understanding of the people of the Central Plains. At most, they knew that the Tang people were commanded by Xianyu Zhongtong and Wang Yan. But in terms of fame, neither Xianyu Zhongtong nor Wang Yan could compare to Wang Chong. Now, even the lowest-ranking soldiers of Uzun knew of the name Wang Chong. This name was accompanied by all sorts of unfathomable and mysterious conjectures. Many people in the great Tang Empire were saying that this mysterious youth in the distant capital had long ago predicted that Meng Shizhao and Uzun would start this war. Although Lion City was said to be built for merchants, its defenses and preparations were on the level of a war. Even the Uzun people had accepted this theory. Even Fengjie and Jiasidu had been rather curious about this youth called Wang Chong. Although the two of them did not believe that he had such foresight, the existence of Lion City had truly caused immeasurable damage to the Mengshi, Yusang army's tactics and the course of the war. There was no doubt about this. And the name of Wang Chong had become an existence that the Mengshi, Yusang army could not ignore. But no one had expected him to descend from the heavens and appear here from the capital. Moreover, he had also defeated Jiao Sero and Fengjie, and even Huishu Wuzong, the lofty Uzun great general, had fallen for Wang Chong's plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain and suffered a minor defeat. Impossible. The first to react and find this result unacceptable was not Jiao Sero or King Meng Shizhao, but Fengjie. How could that kid be so powerful? His eyes were open and his emotions were fluctuating wildly. Constructing a city and commanding soldiers were two completely different concepts. Even when he had first heard that a brat of the Tang dynasty had constructed that vexing lion city, Fengjie had only felt that this fellow posed a threat to Meng Shizhao. However, this was completely different from Wang Chong leading an army to defeat him. "Prime Minister, are you sure it's him?" Jiao Sero suddenly raised his head, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Although he already completely trusted Daluan Ruozan, Jiao Sero still felt that the Prime Minister was being a little too certain. "That's right, Prime Minister. That Wang Jiuling is known as the brilliant minister of the Tang dynasty. When he was around, the Tang dynasty was in a state of splendor. Even the son of heaven of the Tang dynasty was supported by him. He has 3 sons and 1 daughter. His eldest son is an important civil official of the Tang dynasty, and his 3rd son, Wang Yan, is an expert in the art of war. His defenses are probably even tighter than Xianyu Zhongtong's. If you add on Wang Fu and Wang Chong, wouldn't the Wang clan be filled with elites?" Jelifeng's hands were pressed against the armrests of her chair, her eyes rippling as if she still found this news somewhat difficult to digest. Although the former prime minister of the Tang dynasty, Wang Jiuling, had retired for more than 10 years, he still had a great influence in the Tang dynasty. He contributed greatly to the prosperity of the early Tang dynasty. Although he was now old, he still posed a great threat. As long as this person didn't die, there was no peace of mind. Although Wang Jiuling was now old, there were many talented descendants under his name. All of them were elites, and he had the posture of a prime minister. Just thinking about it gave Jelifeng a headache. The 6th Zhao of Irai Lake was too small. Although he had always been ambitious and had some achievements. Although he had always been ambitious and wanted to achieve something, Meng Shizhao was located on a plateau and the air was thin. It was not suitable for anyone other than Uzun. If Meng Shizhao wanted to expand, and if Jelifeng wanted to realize her ambitions, break away from her position as a vassal, and become a true emperor, they could only expand north, toward the direction of the Tang dynasty. The southwest of the Central Plains was connected to Meng Shizhao, and the soil was fertile. This was the perfect place to expand their territory. This was also the reason why Jelifeng wanted to ally with Uzun. However, Jelifeng had no choice but to admit that the difficulty of achieving his ambitions was far greater than he had imagined. "Ha ha ha, Your Majesty, it's actually not difficult to determine the identity of that young man. Xianyu Zhongtong only listens to Zhangqiu Jianxiong's orders. If anyone were to receive Zhangqiu Jianxiong's orders, he would immediately hand over his military authority. However, will Wang Yan hand over his military authority as well? I've heard that Wang Yan is inflexible, and he doesn't know how to be flexible. Even Zhangqiu Jianxiong wouldn't be able to get him to hand over his military authority in the midst of a battlefield that is constantly changing and intense. Daluan Ruozhen surveyed the crowd. The crowd fell silent. Only Jelifeng and Duangechuan had contemplative looks on their faces. The people of Uzan didn't know much about the Tang dynasty, especially the affairs of the royal court in the Central Plains. However, Jelifeng was different. He knew the internal affairs of the Tang dynasty like the back of his hand, so he knew that what Daluan Ruozhen said was true. Also, have you ever wondered why the first thing that child did when he first appeared wasn't to do anything else? There were so many people on the mountaintop. Instead, he headed straight for Wang Fu's mountain. If he didn't have a close relationship with Wang Yan, he wouldn't be so concerned about the matter, right? So if you connect all these things together, then think about that Qilan son of the Wang clan. Tell me, besides him, who else could satisfy so many demands at once? With these final words, Daluan Ruozhen silently smiled at the people in the tent. Unlike Huishu Wuzong, Daluan Ruozhen had always been concerned with matters of strategy. The death of 50,000 soldiers was a major event for Huishu Wuzong, especially for the Mengshi, Yusang army, but it was nothing to Daluan Ruozhen. If one wanted to gain, one had to make sacrifices. In truth, when one considered the illustrious reputation of the Tang dynasty at its peak, the death of 50,000 soldiers was completely within Daluan Ruozhen's expectations. On the contrary, it was Jelifeng's ability to defeat Xian Yuzhongtong at the start and his subsequent smooth sailing that made Daluan Ruozhen feel that something was amiss and out of his expectations. On the contrary, this result was the normal performance of the Tang dynasty. Prime Minister is correct. In order to fulfill all these conditions, it has to be a descendant of the Wang clan, and the most likely candidate is that youngest son of Wang Yan, Wang Chong. Although I've never interacted with him before, since he was able to construct Lion City to obstruct us and ruin our plans, he is the most likely candidate. Jelifeng sternly said. Ha ha ha, this war has only just begun to get interesting. I said before that the Tang dynasty of the Central Plains couldn't possibly only have this little ability after centuries of accumulation. Even 100 feet can die but not stiffen, much less the Tang dynasty of the Central Plains. Only now can I feel at ease about this war. Daluan Ruozhen waved his fan, his entire person exuding a carefree and tranquil aura. He did not seem at all like he had just lost a battle. Jelifeng imperceptibly creased her brow, but she said nothing. Although Jelifeng tolerated it, one emperor's Duangechuan was not so easy to deal with. Prime Minister, don't forget. The Tang dynasty is our enemy. Although he admired Daluan Ruozhen's ability to see through the minutest details and even predict the enemy's moves, Daluan Ruozhen's attitude of not being able to differentiate between friend and foe was really displeasing. He had just suffered a great defeat and lost 50,000 elite cavalrymen. Only Daluan Ruozhen could laugh about this. Ha, General, don't misunderstand me. Since our Uzan has sent out our troops, we are naturally prepared to work together with Mengshi Zhao to deal with the Tang dynasty. I'm just a little interested in that child. Although the Wang clan is a clan of ministers and generals, Wang Zhuling was born a civil official. He was able to move unhindered in the past because he relied on a group of loyal subordinates and extremely powerful warriors. In terms of the art of war, while he is top-notch, he has yet to reach the level that we imagine him to be. Otherwise, Wang Yan wouldn't still not have been made a duke or marquis. Daluan Ruozhen slowly walked forward, waving the feather fan in his hand and a playful look on his face. I'm just a little curious. If the Wang clan's art of war isn't enough to teach the level that you speak of, then where did that child learn his art of war? Let alone us, not even Wang Zhuling, Wang Zhongxi, or Zhang Shogue of the northeast have ever learned the tactics used by that child. Where did he, a teenager, learn them? I know all the books of the Central Plains like the back of my hand, but I've never seen this sort of art of war. Daluan Ruozen's eyes shone brighter and brighter. Almost instinctively, he sensed that this Chilan son of the Wang clan was completely different from anyone he had ever met. Daluan Ruozen sensed immense potential in him. Wuxia Wuzong, Your Majesty, generals, ministers, when the war starts, I don't care how you deal with the Anam Protectorate, but you must capture that child alive. Are you joking? How can we hold back on the battlefield? Moreover, that child poses too great of a threat to us. If he stays here for another 15 minutes, many more of us will die. This sort of person should naturally be killed first. Why should we leave him alive? The veins on Wuxia Wuzong's forehead were bulging. Although Daluan Ruozen was the prime minister of the Great Ngari royal lineage and had a higher status than Wuxia Wuzong had never truly treated him as his superior. And even if he was his superior, there was no need for him to listen to his every word. This had always been his personality. Just listen to me. I suspect that kid has a never-before-seen military strategy book on him. If we can capture him and interrogate him, it will be of great benefit to our Uzun. Moreover, in the end, the benefits will still be yours. When we meet on the battlefield, death and injury are unavoidable. Moreover, casualties are only a matter of a moment, but obtaining the military strategy book on that child is a matter that will last for generations to come. For our Uzun, the benefits we will obtain will be far greater than 50,000 soldiers. This is an opportunity that has been delivered to our doorstep. No matter what, we can't let it go. That is, if we don't want to face the likes of Wang Jiuling, Wang Zhongxi, Zhang Shougue, Gao Xianji, and Geshu Han. At the end, Daluan Ruozen's gaze was profound. A great general saw victory in a war, but a prime minister saw the fate of the empire for the next few decades, perhaps even centuries, or millennia. This was the difference between Daluan Ruozen and Wuxia Wuzong. Buzz. The moment Daluan Ruozen spoke, Jelifeng and Duangechuan were both shocked. They glanced at each other, but neither of them said anything. It was said that the prime minister of the Uzun Ngari royal lineage, Daluan Ruozen, possessed a monstrous understanding of the Mengshi, Yusang army. While everyone was still discussing yesterday's defeat and the effect that mysterious youth of the Tang dynasty had on the Mengshi, Yusang army, Daluan Ruozen had already determined the identity of his opponent, and he had even smelled an enormous opportunity from this defeat. Uzun is already powerful enough. One Daluan Ruozen, one Wuxia Wuzong, and there are still the other 3 generals and 4 generals. If we obtain some formidable military strategy book, our Mengshi Zhao will have just sent away the tiger only to welcome the wolf. In the end, we'll still be vassals. As for that Wang Chong, we either have to kill him as quickly as possible, or we have to think of a way to get it for ourselves. No matter what, we can't let Uzun get it. Jelifeng sat motionlessly on the bench, his face expressionless, but countless thoughts were running through his mind. Mengshi Zhao and Uzun were both allies and enemies. Besides working together, they had to be on guard. Chapter 557. Jelifeng, Duangechuan, and Fengjie quickly left. In the tent, Daluan Ruozen and Wuxia Wuzong were also preparing to leave. The 100,000 or so soldiers of the Anam Protectorate and Allied Army had already left Lion City. Cutting them off meant cutting off the final obstacle to the southwest. Without Xianyu Zhongtong holding them back, the entire southwest would belong to Uzun and Mengshi Zhao. This war between the 3 empires would usher in a conclusion. Moreover, both sides had already made up their minds that the youth of the Tang dynasty could not be allowed to leave this place. Prime Minister. Why did you tell Jelifeng just now? Once Jelifeng and Mengshi Zhao's generals had left, Wuxia Wuzong suddenly turned his head to Daluan Ruozen. Don't tell me that you don't know what Jelifeng will think if he learns of this matter. Fools have their own ways of using fools, and smart people have their own ways of using smart people. Haven't you noticed? Ever since he unexpectedly defeated Xianyu Zhongtong at Irai, Jelifeng no longer has much regard for our Uzun. Daluan Ruozen's smile faded, his eyes suddenly turning profound. This, Huishu Wuzong was dumbfounded. He truly had never thought about this problem. He was a general, a soldier, and what he considered was strategy and tactics, as well as victory and defeat in a battle. The things that Daluan Ruozen had spoken of had already delved into the human heart, and he truly had not thought about them. With Jelifeng at this step, there's no way out. Does he still dare to betray us? Ha! Who knows? Didn't the emperor of the Tang dynasty, whose name was Zhao Zhao, also not expect Jelifeng to rebel? Daluan Ruozen said as he waved his fan. With a light step, an invisible barrier burst out from his feet and quickly enveloped the surroundings. The human heart is the hardest to fathom. Jelifeng is full of ambition, and the southwest probably won't be enough to satisfy him. Even if he is unwilling to submit to Tang, he will not be willing to submit to our Uzun in the future. Since that's the case, it's only good for us to let him understand the threat of the Tang dynasty. Don't forget, we still need his Meng Zhao and 300,000 soldiers to help us deal with the Tang dynasty. But what about that kid? Huishu Wuzong frowned. Although from last night, I don't think that he's as formidable as you make him out to be. But if he really does have some secret military strategy manual of the Central Plains, given Jelifeng's personality, he'll either take it away by force or kill that kid. Either way, it won't be good for us. Ha ha ha, you're the smart one. When I said that he has a military strategy manual, I was just saying it. Whether he really has one or not is another matter. And we'll find out very soon. As for Jelifeng and his son, since they're allies, it won't make a difference whether the military strategy manual ends up in their hands or ours. If it ends up in Jelifeng's hands, we can ask him for it. As long as Jelifeng's wise enough, he won't refuse. And if he doesn't have a military strategy manual, what difference does it make whether that child dies or not? Daluan Ruozen lightly chuckled as he waved his feather fan. Huishu Wuzong helplessly shook his head at Daluan Ruozen. He and Daluan Ruozen had worked together for several decades, and his ability to command was on the same level as Zhangqiu Jianxiong. But Huishu Wuzong was still not very used to Daluan Ruozen's way of thinking and style. Let's go. No matter what, the Annan Protectorate Army and that child called Wang Chong must die today. It's time for this war to end. Huishu Wuzong extended his hands. Clang clang. Two cold rays of light flew out from the edge of the tent. Huishu Wuzong grabbed the two Uzun scimitars and strode out. Boom! The moment Huishu Huizong walked out of the tent, the inside and outside of the tent seemed to be two different worlds in a fierce gale. The entire camp was brimming with killing intent, and the army was on the verge of moving out. Begin. Hurry. All soldiers, move out. Bring the supplies. Cavalry, get ready. Check the weapons, armor, and rations. As far as the eye could see, the Arai plains were densely packed with soldiers. The 300,000 soldiers of Meng Zhao and Yu Sang had added a somber air to the battlefield. Have you found any traces of the Tang soldiers? Huishu Huizong looked forward and waved his hand, not even turning his head. Milord, although the Tang soldiers have used some tricks, we've already found their tracks. They're on a mountain in the southwest. Behind Huishu Huizong came the sound of hooves as an elite scout mounted his horse and respectfully said. Very good. Pass on my order. The army will immediately move out. Yes, milord. The elite scout turned around and galloped away. The hoofbeats of the warhorses were getting farther and farther away. Raising his head to glance at the dark clouds in the sky, Huishu Wuzong's eyes turned much colder and harsher. Regardless of politics, the duty of a soldier was to fight, to destroy their opponents. Everything else had nothing to do with him. Zhangqiu Jianxiong, you've lost. A harsh light flashed through his eyes as Huishu Wuzong mounted his horse and galloped north. At this moment, the dark clouds of war had reached an unimaginable level. Without the protection of Lion City, the Tang dynasty and the Mengshi, Yusang army would face a decisive battle in the southwest. Rumble. The earth quaked. War had come far sooner than anyone had imagined. But when the final mountain garrisoned by the Annam Protectorate appeared before the eyes of the Mengshi, Yusang army, everyone was stunned. What appeared before their eyes was not a barren mountain, but a completely different scene. At the top of the mountain, thick smoke billowed. Waves of green smoke rose into the sky, and along the towering clouds. And around the towering mountain, from top to bottom, one could vaguely make out the image of a fortified fortress of steel. Countless Annam Protectorate soldiers were stationed on the summit, exuding a somber aura. What's going on here? Let alone anyone else, even someone like Wuxia Wuzong revealed a look of shock. This was completely different from what they had expected. What is that? It doesn't look like a fortress. Fenjie was also shocked. What did that brat do? Jiao Sero's eyes widened in shock. Everyone looked like they had just swallowed a fly. They had originally believed that in the wilderness, the Annam Protectorate would have no protection and would be no match for the Mengshi, Yusang army. But the scene before them was completely different. Like a miracle, these Tang soldiers had managed to erect a fortified fortress in such a short time, and it seemed to be an extremely formidable one. At the very least, it was an extremely frightening sight from a distance. Just how did that brat do it? Lion City has already fallen, and the borders of the Tang dynasty can't even take care of themselves. There's nothing in this barren mountain range, so how did he manage to create all these things? It seems like if we want to deal with the Annam Protectorate, we have to kill that brat first. Longkinba spat, his face full of hatred. This style was far too familiar, almost identical to Erai's Lion City. It could only have come from the Wang clan's Qilin son. To the Mengshi, Yusang army, this was not a good omen. This isn't good news at all. It seems like the Tang people made ample preparations before we came. The clattering of hooves could be heard from the vast army. Mengshi Zhao's King Jelifeng rode a black Erai steed, her brow furrowed as she parted the crowd and slowly rode up from the rear. This should be another of that youth's handiwork, right? The Uzun army had pursued the Annam Protectorate through the snow, and Jelifeng had not seen a single one of the two battles that had been lost, so she could only speculate. Jelifeng had originally been somewhat skeptical of the Uzun army's words. But at this moment, as he stared at this desolate mountain peak, all of Jelifeng's doubts vanished without a trace. Even though the battle had not yet begun, at this moment, even Jelifeng could sense the thorny nature of the mountain range. That youth from the Wang clan was even more difficult to deal with than she had imagined. Ha ha ha, isn't this very normal? Since we know what this child has done, this shouldn't be surprising, right? Daluan Ruozan waved his feather fan as he rode over from the side on a majestic highland steed. Unlike the others, Daluan Ruozan's reaction to all of this was much calmer. Since he had already seen the damage that youth from the Tang dynasty had done to the Uzun army yesterday, Daluan Ruozan was not very surprised. To be honest, I'm getting more and more curious. Where did this child learn these things? A teenager shouldn't have this kind of ability, right? Moreover, no one in the Tang dynasty should be able to come up with such strange tactics. The Tang dynasty of the Central Plains has a history of over 1,000 years, and there are many extraordinary people hidden within. I'm more and more convinced that this youth has a formidable book on the art of war or strategy on him. Jelifeng and Duan Gu both paled at these words, but neither of them said anything. However, no matter how many schemes he has or how many strategies he has, he can't change the fact that the Annam Protectorate will become history. Those things on the mountain, if my guess is right, they should be some simple fortifications. The construction of a city isn't that simple. Even that Lion City took more than a year. There's no reason for him to be able to uproot a city in such a short amount of time. Daluan Ruozan's eyes were bright, and he appeared wise and far-sighted. Prime Minister is correct. No matter how many tricks the Tang people have up their sleeves, today, they will be completely wiped out. From today onwards, the Southwest will no longer have an Anan protectorate. Jelifeng slowly regained her composure. With a wave of her arm, roars filled the air, and the vast Mengshi, Yusang army surged forward like a black flood of steel. Nay! The winds howled and the warhorses neighed. When thousands of cavalry neighed in the wind, the atmosphere was grim and somber. In an instant, the atmosphere of war had become several times more intense. Advance! Advance! No, we can't let a single Tang people escape. Anyone who dares to retreat will be killed without question. Line up and listen to orders. Anyone who dares to move without permission will be executed. The army awaits orders. Today is the day when our Mengshi Zhao army thoroughly defeats the Tang people. Level by level, orders were passed down from the upper echelons to the lower echelons. With the sounds of beatings and curses, all the leaders and officers began to get to work. Chapter 558. It's finally begun. As the massive Mengshi, Yusang army rumbled out from the horizon, Wang Chang's mind was in turmoil. The vast army was like a surging sea, surging toward the lonely mountain in the center. Anyone who was not present would find it impossible to imagine the shock. Wang Chong had imagined countless times the war of the Southwest that would usher in the empire's destruction, but none of the battles he had imagined could compare to the shock of seeing it with his own eyes. Standing at the very top of the mountain, looking down at his surroundings, he could feel the stifling pressure coming from all sides. Although they had already defeated more than 50,000 Uzun cavalry, to the Mengshi, Yusang army, which still had nearly 500,000 soldiers, this was only a small wave, far from being able to deal them any serious damage. Warning: major event decisive battle of the Southwest has officially begun. The Anan Protectorate currently has 64,824 survivors. Once the Anan Protectorate survivors drop below 40,000, user will be obliterated and will be considered to have failed the trial. However, for every 10,000 Mengshi, Yusang soldiers killed by user will be rewarded with 50 points of destiny energy and 500 points of upper limit. When user kills 100,000 enemies in the decisive battle, user will be rewarded with a temporary reward of 1 level of upper limit. This reward is only effective during the decisive battle. Upon completion of the mission, it will be cancelled. Just as Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil, a familiar voice that only Wang Chong could hear suddenly rang out in his mind. Wang Chong froze at this voice, a look of surprise on his face. I can increase the upper limit. This news had truly taken Wang Chong by surprise. The Southwest War had already reached its final showdown, and Wang Chong only had 60,000 some Anan Protectorate soldiers under his command. The rest were all reinforcements led by Wang Chong's father and Wang Chong himself. The 60,000 Anan Protectorate could easily be reduced to 40,000 in a battle of this scale. However, it would be different if there was a limit to the reward. Although every 10,000 people could only increase the limit by 500, it was undoubtedly the best news that Wang Chong had heard in this desperate situation. Although 500 is a small number, it adds up. If he killed 20,000, he would be able to reach 1,000. If he killed 50,000, he would be able to reach 5,000. If you can reach 100,000, you will be able to obtain an additional reward of 5,000. Wang Chong's heart was in turmoil. Although 5,000 was a drop in the bucket in this kind of big battle, it was a huge improvement for Wang Chong's situation. Moreover, the Stone of Destiny mentioning the upper limit of the Halo level reward in the final battle was also an unexpected gain. Although it's only a temporary boost, it's enough. Wang Chong had thought about it a long time ago. The Stone of Destiny wouldn't blindly oppress its host and create an inevitable death. That wouldn't be beneficial to it at all. Moreover, this didn't match the Stone of Destiny's behavior. After all, it wasn't an intelligent life form. Now, everything had confirmed his initial guess. So that's how it is. Wang Chong took a deep breath and quickly regained his senses. No matter what kind of opportunity the Stone of Destiny had provided, it was only an opportunity. Whether it was the upper limit of the quota or the Halo-level reward, he had to fight for it himself. In this battle, the most important thing was not the Stone of Destiny, but himself. Attention everyone. Prepare to meet the enemy. Swordsmiths. Speed up the welding. Inscribers, do it at the same time. Mr. Zhang, supervise the other smiths. Follow the blueprint and quickly assemble the wall modules. Wang Chong stood on the mountain peak like a statue. With a wave of his arm, he issued a series of orders. Rumble. Thick smoke roiled over the mountain peak. Following Wang Chong's orders, the fires rising from the furnaces grew several times hotter. Thick smoke blotted out the sun, wave after wave of heat rising, as if many monsters of the fire element were breathing into the heavens. And following Wang Chong's orders, the nearly 100,000 Tang soldiers, the smiths under Zhang Shouji's command, and the swordsmiths, inscribers, and smiths dispatched by Su Yiqin, began to move like a massive and precise machine. The entire mountain peak was in full swing. Roar! Ha! Following a series of chants, from the top of the mountain to the bottom, huge black steel modules were erected one after another under the cooperation of countless soldiers and craftsmen. Each of these steel modules was as tall as a man, and they were riddled with holes, bolts, screws, iron bars. Nothing like this had ever appeared in the history of the Tang dynasty. Not even someone as experienced and knowledgeable as a master architect of the court like Zhang Shouji had ever seen something like this. Numerous child-sized horizontal bolts and nuts were inserted into the holes of the two huge and heavy steel modules. The horizontal bolts and nuts were covered with inscriptions of toughness. Then, scorching hot molten iron was quickly poured onto them. 1 block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks, each of the heavy steel modules had many places where they could be clamped together, and the modules were quickly joined together to form the massive and sturdy wall. Clang clang clang. The sound of metal clashing was incessant, and sparks kept bursting out. From top to bottom of this grotesquely rocky mountain, massive steel walls rose up from the ground like a miracle. Right under the eyes of the Mengshi, Yusang army, a massive monster fortress was rapidly taking shape. Whoosh! Standing on the summit, Wang Chong unfurled a white paper that was more than 1 zhang long and 4 feet wide. On this paper was a towering mountain, covered with countless intricate designs that only Wang Chong could understand. This was the paper that Wang Chong had given to Su Yiqin several months ago. If one looked carefully, one would realize that the mountain Wang Chong had drawn for Su Yiqin was exactly the same as the mountain they were currently standing on. And when one considered that this had been drawn by Wang Chong long ago, before the Southwestern War had even begun, it was even more astonishing. There was no doubt that Wang Chong had predicted this war before things had developed to this point, and he had even chosen this highest mountain in the southwest as the site of the final battle. "Chonger, how is it?" A voice came from the side. On the summit, Wang Yan and Xianyu Zhongtong were standing behind Wang Chong, grave expressions on their faces. The war was imminent, and Mengshi Zhao and Uzun had mobilized their entire armies. Duluan Ruozhen, Huishu Wuzong, Jelifeng, Duangechuan, these enemies of the southwest, who had once been locked in a stalemate with Zhangqiu Jianxiong for half his life, had led an army of 500,000 and was charging toward them. The lives of nearly 100,000 Tang soldiers, including the craftsmen on the mountain, the lives of everyone, and the nearly 1 million civilians of the southwest, all of them were tied to this war. The imperial court could no longer send any soldiers, and the Annan Protectorate had no path of retreat. This was a battle with their backs against the wall. In the face of these world-shaking opponents, both Wang Yan and Xianyu Zhongtong were under heavy pressure. But neither of them were the sort of people who would show their joy on their faces and easily speak their minds. Right now, the Southwest and the lives of the 100,000 soldiers can only depend on this child, Wang Yan and Xian Yuzhongtong looked at Wang Chong at the same time, their eyes brimming with anticipation. Strictly speaking, the war in the southwest was already a failure. At the very least, in the early stages, the two of them had completely failed. The true turning point had only appeared after Wang Chong had appeared. If there was one person in the southwest who could resolve this crisis, this desperate situation, then it could only be Wang Chong. Ever since last night's successful breakout, the two of them had actually handed over all the authority to command the army to Wang Chong. Even Wang Yan and Xian Yuzhongtong had completely followed Wang Chong's lead. Not a single superfluous word had been exchanged. Of course, the two of them had not made this decision without thinking. In yesterday's battle, Wang Chong had used his own method to prove himself. And even though they couldn't understand the blueprints in Wang Chong's hands, but there was one thing that the two of them could see. It was clear that Wang Chong had brought his army here because he had made ample preparations. These furnaces and the other steel castings were proof, and there was no need to mention the oiled paper covering the army provisions buried in the caves on the summit. As for these steel walls, they were the best cover for the army. It's about there, 80% complete. Based on the distance, not even Wuxia Wuzong's elite cavalry will make it in time. Yesterday, when I led them around in circles, I had already calculated the time. Moreover, after last night's loss, Uzun's army can no longer split up with Meng Zhao's army. Even if we give them a chance, they won't dare to come. Wang Chong said, his face brimming with confidence. In front of Wang Yan and Xian Yuzhongtong, facing Wuxia Wuzong, two of the empire's elite generals, only Wang Chong could say such words with such confidence. Confidence came from strength. Yesterday, if Wang Chong had dared to say such words, he would definitely have been laughed at. But now, even Wang Yan, who had always treated Wang Chong harshly, inwardly acknowledged the strength of Wang Chong's words. Speed up. Don't get careless. Last time, Wuxia Wuzong didn't even know of your existence, but this time, he's prepared, so it's completely different. In addition, Uzun still has Daluan Ruozhen, and this person's intelligence is as deep as the sea. On the surface, it looks like Jelifeng has sent emissaries to persuade Uzun, but in reality, Daluan Ruozhen is the true mastermind behind the scenes. Wang Yan clasped his hands together. Ah! Wang Chong turned his head to glance at his father, a hint of surprise in his eyes. He naturally knew that Daluan Ruozhen was the true mastermind behind the scenes. To be more precise, the two of them were in cahoots. Jelifeng was ambitious and the mastermind on the surface, while Daluan Ruozhen was the mastermind behind the scenes. But for his father to be able to see this was rather surprising. But perhaps I've underestimated father in the past. Although his personality is a little inflexible, he definitely doesn't lack intelligence. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to reach his current level. Wang Chong quickly regained his composure. Although he was shocked, Wang Chong quickly realized that it was probably because he had understood his father too little in the past. Only now, fighting side by side with his father, was Wang Chong slowly beginning to understand a little. Father, be at ease. I won't let you down. Wang Chong turned his head and smiled, the light quickly returning to his eyes. To be able to fight side by side with his father had always been Wang Chong's deepest desire. Alas, he had never had the chance to realize it in the past. But now, it had finally become a reality. Hu! The fierce winds ruffled his black hair. Standing next to his tall and muscular father, Wang Chong felt incomparably gratified. At this moment, he felt no fear, no panic, no apprehension, only endless calm, like a deep pool. Daluan Ruozhen, Wuxia Wuzong. Come. Let me see just what tricks you have. Chapter 559. Pa. With a flash of light, a spear covered in dark gold veins and containing a destructive power lightly tapped the stone steel. Pa. The stone steel collapsed and cracked open like a spider web. Then, it shattered into pieces. Humph. The steel of Emperor Wu of Han. It's one thing if you didn't know about it before, but now that you know, how could you still keep it? A general riding a horse with explosive power slowly walked over from behind. His eyes were extremely sharp. In the future, the Tang people will no longer be able to set foot on Irai. The southwest will be our world. The general's eyes were filled with hatred as he glanced at the debris on the side of the road. Only Meng Zhao's generals could hate the steel of Emperor Wu of Han so much. Haha, general, well done. The Han treated the Meng Zhao people as slaves, so they naturally deserve to be smashed. But our Uzun is different. Uzun and Meng Zhao are allies, so we naturally should work together to deal with the Tang people. Daluan Ruozun waved his fan as he slowly walked over from behind. There was a hint of a smile on his lips, making him look elegant and free. Humph, that better be the case. The general snorted and stood to the side. Prime Minister, please don't blame us. Generals are all crude people, and they always speak like this. King Jelifeng of Meng Zhao walked over from behind with Crown Prince Jelifeng, Great General Duan Gechuan, and a group of Meng Zhao generals. Haha, not at all. I don't blame you, I don't blame you. Daluan Ruozun laughed and waved his hand, but a strange look flashed through his eyes. The people of Uzun are the same. The two looked at each other and smiled, then turned their gazes to the opposite mountain peak. 500 feet above the foot of the mountain, huge steel city walls were scattered all over the place, towering like stars in the sky. Each of these steel walls was incomparably heavy and extremely thick. Thousands of these steel walls, section by section, layer by layer, were arranged in intervals from the foot of the mountain to the top. Behind these steel walls, tens of thousands of fully armed Tang dynasty infantry hid behind them, fully on guard. Those eyes were staring down the mountain at the Mengshi, Yusang army like hungry wolves. Although the Annan Protectorate suffered heavy losses in the Battle of Irai, with less than 70,000 soldiers remaining, the remaining soldiers were all elites. Their combat power did not decrease but increased. Purely in terms of fighting power, the current Tang army was not one bit inferior to the Mengshi, Yusang army, on the contrary, it was superior. Even Uzun could not compare to a single soldier in terms of quality. This is bad. Daluan Ruozun's eyebrows twitched. Even if he was not good at the art of war, he could tell at a glance that the Tang people were building tricky fortifications in this way. This was definitely not good news for the Uzun, who were experts in cavalry charges. Wang Yan, Xianyu Zhongtong, come up and answer me. Daluan Ruozun suddenly raised his head to the summit across from him. Kakakakaka. The response to Daluan Ruozun was the clattering of gears. Countless ballistae emerged from behind the steel walls, their arrowheads gleaming with cold light as they aimed at Daluan Ruozun from all sides. Protect Uzun Prime Minister. Loud shouts and bangs could be heard as several dozen Mengshi Zhao soldiers raised their shields and charged out of the army. The massive shields piled up in front of Daluan Ruozun, shielding Daluan Ruozun behind them. Right now, Mengshi Zhao and Uzun were grasshoppers on the same rope. Jelifeng had long ago ordered that no matter what, they had to protect these two important figures of Mengshi Zhao. Enough. Daluan Ruozun waved his hand. Just as he was about to speak, a voice came from the summit. Daluan Ruozun, there's no need to go through so much trouble. If you have something to say, just say it. We can hear you from here. Xianyu Zhongtong's sonorous and forceful voice came from the summit, so loud and clear that it could be heard even from far away. On the summit, the soldiers parted to reveal two imposing figures. They were Wang Yan and Xianyu Zhongtong. The wind was blowing fiercely. The two supreme commanders of the Great Hall were fully armed and stood at the top of the mountain. Their majestic figures were like gods, causing people to feel fear at the sight of them. Ha 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 ha, Brother Wang, Brother Xianyu, we meet again. The two of you are truly generous. You've actually built another city so quickly. If I'm not wrong, this should be the work of that little brother Wang Chong who defeated us yesterday, right? As the saying goes, no discord, no concord. Before the battle, can you let me see the little brother who defeated 2 of my generals in a row? As he said the last sentence, a sharp glint flashed in Daluan Ruozen's eyes. Behind Daluan Ruozen, Jiao Sero, Si, Jelifeng, Duan Gechuan, and the others all looked up. The army of 500,000 suddenly became much quieter. Although they had long ago confirmed Wang Chong's identity, even Zheluofeng and Jia Siluo, who had already exchanged blows with Wang Chong, hadn't been able to clearly see him. Somehow, the two's attitude towards Wang Chong had completely changed. These guys. On top of the mountain, after hearing Daluan Ruozen's words, Wang Yan and Xianyu Zhongtong's minds buzzed. It was not difficult for Uzen's and Meng Shizhao's people to know of Wang Chong's existence. After all, they had already met him yesterday. However, it was really surprising that they knew his identity and name. Even Wang Chong, who was behind Wang Yan and Xianyu Zhongtong, felt warmth in their hearts. I didn't expect to be exposed so quickly. Wang Chong took a deep breath and looked at the figure at the foot of the mountain. He was not very tall, and his heart was filled with fear. I knew this guy would not be easy to deal with, but I didn't expect him to be even more difficult than I thought. In any era, Daluan Ruozen was an extremely difficult character to deal with. Wang Chong had never met Daluan Ruozen before. This fellow has never even met me, but he was able to identify my identity and background with a single glance. He's truly frightening. If possible, I must think of a way to kill him. Otherwise, he will definitely become a major foe of my Tang dynasty. Father, Lord Xianyu Zhongtong, Daluan Ruozen has come to probe me. It's fine. He won't be able to find out anything about me. Let's see just what he wants to say. Wang Chong suddenly said. Putting aside their opposing identities and standpoints, Wang Chong was actually quite curious about this Uzun prime minister who had single-handedly led the Southwestern War. For a general to be able to fight against such an enemy, even if he died in battle, it would be an honor. Wang Yan and Xianyu Zhongtong had no idea what Wang Chong was thinking. As they gazed down the mountain at the Mengshi, Yusang generals, their bodies tensed as if they were facing a powerful foe. Prime Minister, if you have something to say, just say it. My son is still young and does not deserve such praise from great minister. On the summit, Wang Yan suddenly spoke, his voice like a great bell. At the base of the mountain, the eyes of the Mengshi Yusang army flashed. Wang Yan's words had undoubtedly confirmed Daluan Ruozen's identity. Ha ha ha, brother Wang, a straightforward person doesn't resort to insinuations. The Tang dynasty can no longer send reinforcements. With your meager forces, you are no match for us. This being the case, why don't you join us? Perhaps you might even be able to survive. Chapter 560. Hearing Daluan Ruozen's words, Wang Chong's father, Wang Yan, only frowned and did not say anything. However, Wang Chong, who was behind him, could not help but feel a buzz in his heart. This Daluan Ruozen is so cunning. Now that things had come to this, there was no room for reconciliation between the Tang dynasty, Meng Shizhao, and Uzun. There was no way Daluan Ruozen did not understand this. As soon as he said this, it was no longer important whether his father and Xianyu Zhongtong agreed or not. His goal was to disrupt the hearing and sound, and affect the morale of the army. Wang Chong's gaze swept across. As expected, the morale of the army, which was originally united, immediately changed slightly. Although it was not to the extent of weakness or actual surrender, there was no doubt that the morale of the army was not as strong as before. The human heart is subtle. No matter what the situation is, as long as there is a glimmer of hope, they will not give up, even if they know that this glimmer of hope does not exist. However, this is the subconscious and instinctive reaction of humans. Wang Chong sighed inwardly. A wise man would use words to move the heart, but a wise man would achieve his goal regardless of whether you would be moved or not. This was also the first time Wang Chong met this prime minister of the Uzungari royal lineage. But it was this first meeting that Wang Chong immediately discovered that Daluan Ruozhen was far more difficult to deal with than he had imagined. A heavy sword without a sharp edge. A person like Daluan Ruozhen has a purpose in his every move. With a simple sentence, he is able to strike the morale of the army without revealing his identity. If this person does not die, he will definitely be a disaster for the Tang dynasty in the future. Wang Chong pondered inwardly. His father's personality was not suitable to argue with Daluan Ruozhen. Wang Chong turned his gaze and quickly looked at Xian Yuzhongtong. "Milord," Wang Chong suddenly took 2 steps forward and whispered in his ear. "Ha ha ha, since ancient times, the defeated general surrenders to the victorious general. I've never heard of the victorious general surrendering to the defeated general." Uzun had always been known for his invincible cavalry. However, Uzun wasn't a match for us even when they had the upper hand. Instead, they had lost 50,000 soldiers. How could such an army be worth our surrender? Daluan Ruozhen, don't you think you're overestimating yourself? Yesterday, it was 50,000. Have you thought about how many more you want to die today? Xian Yuzhongtong laughed out loud, his voice resounding through the heavens and earth. Bastard! Before Daluan Ruozhen could respond to Xian Yuzhongtong's words, Jiao Sero, Fen Jie, and Long Qinba couldn't help but turn purple, their expressions extremely nasty. Xian Yuzhongtong's words were clearly referring to their defeat last night. Don't worry about him. He's just trying to provoke you. Look around you. Daluan Ruozhen sternly said. Everyone's hearts froze as they subconsciously looked around. The morale of the surrounding army instantly began to fluctuate. Ming. The soldiers were stunned and instantly speechless. It was obvious that this was a psychological attack. Humph. Daluan Ruozhen sneered and quickly raised his head to the summit. Xian Yuzhongtong, you're still the mighty protector general of the Annan Protectorate. When did you get the chance to speak for someone else and become their mouthpiece? Call that brat Wang Chong behind you to come out. On the summit, Wang Chong and Xian Yuzhongtong both felt their hearts tremble. Daluan Ruozhen's gaze was extremely sharp, allowing him to see through the problem at a glance. Humph, Daluan Ruozhen, I suggest you stop trying to talk your way out of this. Do you really think you can win something on the battlefield with your mouth? If you have any skill, let's see it on the battlefield. This time, there was no need for Wang Chong to say anything. Xian Yuzhongtong sneered and rebuked him. At this point, Daluan Ruozhen's eyes turned and he began to walk back. Since that's the case, as you wish. How is it? A few steps away, Huishu Wuzong and Mengshi Zhao's King Jelifeng swiftly approached. This brat is more troublesome and cautious than I imagined. For someone like Xian Yuzhongtong to listen to him is truly beyond my expectations. In such a short amount of time, it seems like that child has already gained complete control of the army. Wang Yan and Xian Yuzhongtong are even willing to assist him in secondary positions. This isn't good news at all. Daluan Ruozhen said with a frown. His original intention was to meet Wang Chong and test him. However, he didn't expect that Wang Chong wouldn't come out at all. Even Daluan Ruozhen couldn't do anything about it. Although he already knew Wang Chong's identity, he couldn't see him face to face, so he couldn't gauge Wang Chong's strength. You have to be careful. This child doesn't look easy to deal with. Isn't Prime Minister overestimating him? Jelifeng frowned. She admitted that Wang Chong might be different from other children. After all, a normal child wouldn't have been able to beat up Uzun's cavalry last night. However, no matter how powerful a child was, he was still a child. Even if he had some kind of inheritance or some kind of military strategy, he was still a child. Jelifeng always felt that Daluan Ruozhen thought that the child was more powerful than he really was. Humph, I hope I'm overestimating him. But we'll find out in a little while. With these words, Daluan Ruozhen left with a flick of his sleeve. I don't believe that you'll be able to hide forever. Daluan Ruozhen quickly vanished into the crowd. There was nothing left for him to do. Now, it was time for the Mengshi, Yusang generals like Huishu Wuzong and Duangechuan to appear. Just now, why didn't you appear? At almost the same time, on the summit, Xianyu Zhongtong turned his head in confusion to look at Wang Chong. Daluan Ruozhen had stated that he wanted to meet Wang Chong, but Wang Chong had refused to meet him. Although he didn't think that it was necessary to meet Daluan Ruozhen, Xianyu Zhongtong still felt that Wang Chong was intentionally avoiding him. Even though Xianyu Zhongtong didn't see this as necessary. No. In a place where the Mengshi, Yusang army could not see, Wang Chong shook his head, a cautious expression on his face. Daluan Ruozhen is an extremely formidable person, though it can't be seen on the surface. But his every move has a deeper meaning. The entire army, including father and even you, Lord Protector General, is something that Daluan Ruozhen knows like the back of his hand. Thus, he can target you based on your personalities. The art of war says it well, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. In the entire army, the only person that Daluan Ruozhen doesn't understand is me. The less Daluan Ruozhen knows about me, the more cautious he will be, and the less likely he will be to act rashly. This way, the only one you will have to deal with is Huishu Wuzong. But if he also knows me like the back of his hand, everything will be completely different. Don't forget that the Uzun-Gari royal lineage has always been one civil and one military, one minister and one general. They have always supported each other, just like the twin walls of the empire of our Tang dynasty. When encountering this sort of person, it's never too much to be careful. Wang Chong had a cautious expression. His father Wang Yan and Xianyu Zhongtong might not be able to see it, but Wang Chong was well aware that in this war, Daluan Ruozhen posed a far greater threat than Huishu Wuzong or Duangechuan. Any action that underestimated this Uzun prime minister would only invite humiliation. Father, Lord Xianyu, the Uzun and Mengshi Zhao are about to attack. I'll leave the rest to you. Wang Chong said. Hearing Wang Chong speak of serious matters, both Wang Yan and Xianyu Zhongtong had grave expressions in their eyes. Although Daluan Ruozhen's persuasion to surrender was a psychological attack, it was also a true reflection of their current situation. The lives of 100,000 soldiers were tied to this decisive battle, and the lives of 1 million civilians were also entrusted to it. I'll go down first. Xianyu Zhongtong flung his cloak and left the summit. As a commander-in-chief, he might not be qualified in terms of strategy and tactics, but as a general, he was more than enough. Moreover, the steel modular wall that Wang Chong had set up was like a city leaning against a mountain. It was precisely the defensive terrain that Xianyu Zhongtong was most proficient in. In terms of understanding of the Annan Protectorate, no one was more proficient than Xianyu Zhongtong. On the day of the Battle of Irai, if Xianyu Zhongtong had not led his army away from the city he was defending, away from the terrain he was most familiar with and where he could display his might, he might not have lost so badly against Zheluofeng on the shores of the Irai. Xianyu Zhongtong's departure this time clearly showed his attitude. He had truly left the affairs of the empire's southwest to Wang Chong. Once Xianyu Zhongtong left, only Wang Yan and his son were left on the summit. Chonger, although I did not wish for you to appear here. Our Wang clan has always been a clan of ministers and generals. Whether a general or a minister, we must be loyal to the empire, loyal to the Tang dynasty. Since you have talent in the art of war, don't waste it. Your father believes in you. Wang Yan turned around and looked at Wang Chong said. There was a complicated look in his eyes, but more than that, there was hope. With the war in the southwest developing to this stage, Wang Chong had become everyone's hope. At the very least, he and Xianyu Zhongtong had essentially lost. Yes, father. Wang Chong clenched his fists, his heart deeply moved. Not too long ago, he had also wanted to fight side by side with his father. But he had never been able to fulfill this dream. Although his father had always encouraged him to join the army, his father's harsh personality forbade him from carelessly stepping onto the front lines or his own battlefield. For someone of his father's personality to say such words and affirm his own performance was already quite good. Wang Yan quickly left. Just like Xian Yuzhongtong, Wang Yan also went to command the army. Other than the 60,000 some from the Annam Protectorate, the rest were soldiers under Wang Yan's command and reinforcements from the imperial court. Although Wang Yan did not understand the Annam Protectorate, in terms of commanding these soldiers, not even Xian Yuzhongtong could compare to him. Two of the world's best defenders were willing to lower their stance to assist Wang Chong. In the entire world, no one but Wang Chong could enjoy such treatment. Boom! War drums and horns began to beat. The earth quaked as the vast Mengshi, Yusang army began to move like some prehistoric beast. The earth quaked as the vast Mengshi, Yusang army began to move like some prehistoric beast. A powerful killing intent burst out of the void and quickly engulfed the entire battlefield. Zhang Shouji, get ready. The final step. At the same time, on the summit, Wang Chong waved his right hand and issued a final order. Walala. Fall. On the mountaintop, hundreds of blacksmiths and sword forgers opened the huge iron chests one after another. As they lifted them, countless iron caltrops of different sizes rolled out of the chests and fell down along the mountaintop that was more than 20 zhang wide. These caltrops were covered in sharp spikes, the longer ones several feet long while the shorter ones were 5 or 6 inches long. Iron caltrops of all sizes poured down from the top of the mountain like a black carpet, filling up the last flaw of the mountain's defense system. Chapter 561. Neigh. The winds howled and the warhorses neighed. By the time Xian Yuzhongtong and Daluan Ruozhen's conversation had concluded, the air around the mountain was surging and somber, the atmosphere extremely tense. The neighing of the warhorses, the beating of the drums, and the blaring of the horns all made the atmosphere tense to the extreme. A Mengshi Zhao soldier was fully armored. Although his face was shrouded in armor, the clenching of his fingers on his spear betrayed his true emotions. The other soldiers around him were the same. Not far away, the fierce, courageous, and murderous Uzun soldiers were not faring much better. Their incessant blinking of their eyes revealed the unease in the hearts of these soldiers. The powerful Tang dynasty had left an indelible mark on the Uzun. When they were still children, they had heard that the foreign soldiers of the Tang dynasty had once killed their way to the plateau, even getting close to the Great Snow Mountain Temple. But that was a matter from a very, very long time ago, and the emperor of that time had not even been the same. The Uzun soldiers had already forgotten this memory. Just yesterday, they had even been jeering at the Tang people. But the deaths of 50,000 soldiers had caused these eagles of the plateau to once more recall this pain. Although no one believed that the Annam Protectorate could defeat the 500,000 soldiers of the Mengshi, Yusang army, there was no question that these people were worthy of respect. Move out. Daluan Ruozhen, Huishu Wuzang, Mengshi Zhao, and Jelifeng, the 4 commanders of the Mengshi, Yusang army, rode in a line. Looking up to the summit, they swiftly gave the order to attack. Kaiyil. Kaiyil. The earth quaked as tens of thousands of fully armored soldiers surged toward the last stronghold of the Tang dynasty. Surprisingly, however, the first wave to attack was not the experienced Uzun cavalry, but the soldiers of Mengshi Zhao. Ready. Shields. Following a series of ear-piercing commands, huge steel shields that were as dense as clouds were suddenly raised high into the sky like fish scales, covering the sky. At the same time, the rings of light vibrated. Amidst the rumbling sounds of heavy steel, one after another, war halos shot out from the densely packed large shields. Tenacious halo, defensive halo, black iron halo, tempering halo, charging halo, attack halo. One after another, tens of thousands of halos vibrated and rumbled, connecting into one. In an instant, a huge battle intent erupted from the soldiers of Meng Shizhao. Above these shield-wielding soldiers, the void distorted and a huge rock appeared, emitting a milky white light. Gradually, it appeared. As soon as this huge rock appeared, the entire atmosphere of Meng Shizhao's army instantly changed. It became much heavier and steadier. White Stone Legion. On the top of the mountain, the wind howled. Wang Chong looked down from above and saw the illusion of a huge white rock slowly appearing above the soldiers of Meng Shizhao's front line. Wang Chong's expression instantly turned solemn. Jelifeng is very ambitious. He has indeed trained quite a number of troops over the years. The quality of these troops may not be comparable to the Annam Protectorate, but they are very similar in all aspects. White Stone Legion, one of the elite legions trained under Jelifeng. Although Wang Chong had never seen it before, it was a well-known name back then. This army contributed a lot in the Battle of Irai. The White Stone Legion was one of the armies with the largest number of soldiers in Meng Shizhao. There were no less than 100,000 of them. Rumble. The sky and earth shook. Tens of thousands of Meng Shizhao's White Stone Legion marched in an orderly manner. They divided themselves into phalanxes and moved slowly but firmly towards the Annam Protectorate from all directions. Seeing this scene, both Wang Chong and the other generals on the top of the mountain could not help but feel their eyelids twitch. Meng Shizhao's White Stone Legion is almost the same as the Tang dynasty in terms of marching, the use of shields, and the way of marching. Back then, the Holy Emperor was benevolent and supported Meng Shizhao with many things, including the training methods of the army and the way of battle formations. But now, these are being used by Jelifeng to deal with the Tang dynasty. This guy is really scheming and putting in a lot of effort. Wang Chong's sleeves fluttered in the wind. Thoughts flashed through his mind. With such a similar style of army, coupled with Jelifeng's understanding of the Tang dynasty, and the fact that they were fighting in a foreign land, it was not surprising that the Annam Protectorate suffered a crushing defeat. Unfortunately, Jelifeng, your opponent is me. Looking down the mountain, Wang Chong's gaze slowly turned cold and hard. The art of war was the combination of truth and falsehood. If Jelifeng really thought that he could defeat the Tang dynasty a second time just because he had defeated them once, then he was really wrong. Get ready. Wang Chong raised his right hand and quickly gave the first order. Following this order, the air rumbled, and like magic, one dazzling halo after another rumbled, shooting out wave after wave from the top of the mountain to the foot of the mountain. The 100,000 Tang soldiers stood on different halos from the summit to the base of the mountain. With the help of the steel walls, the original mountain was gone, replaced by a mountain of steel formed from men and steel. Translated by, Hypersheep 325. Killing intent and baleful aura gushed out, exuding a dangerous aura. At this moment, the Tang army was dignified and silent. Everyone exuded the aura of a well-trained, battle-hardened, iron-blooded, and merciless. Anyone who saw this army would be able to sense the frightening strength and aura exuding from them. The tens of thousands of soldiers were solemn and motionless, not a single person making a sound. They were as orderly as a single person. The strength and aura of tens of thousands of people gathered together was not something an ordinary army could achieve. At this moment, the Tang army on the 100,000 mountains once more began to show signs of that invincible Tang dynasty army that had once swept through the world. More than 100,000 Annam Protectorate soldiers had died in the Battle of Irai, but not only had the Annam Protectorate not crumbled, it had even gotten stronger. These scoundrels, at the base of the mountain, the Mengshi, Yusang commanders also widened their eyes at this sight. Even though they stood on different sides, they had to admit that the Tang dynasty's systematic training methods had produced soldiers of such high quality that not even the Uzun could compare. If not for the fact that cavalry were inherently superior to infantry and that the Uzun possessed the most cavalry, the Southwestern War would have ended in a completely different way. Fight! 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 A series of deafening roars rang out as orders were issued. Tens of thousands of white stone soldiers used their shields as cover and advanced in an orderly fashion. On the summit, the clattering of bows and crossbows could be heard. Unlike the Meng Shijiao soldiers who were rapidly approaching, the Tang soldiers on the mountain remained motionless, as if they were statues. Their cold and bright gazes were focused on the base of the mountain. This combination of movement and stillness placed an even greater pressure on the soldiers. 50 zhang. 40 zhang. 30 zhang. 20 zhang. The atmosphere was tense to the extreme. Whether on the summit or the base of the mountain, all the Tang, Mengshi, or Yusang commanders were focused on the front line. Finally, bang! With this massive explosion, the white stone soldiers at the very front finally clashed with the Tang army and began to engage in a chaotic melee. Kaiyil! 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 Heaven-shaking roars shook the world, rumbling like harvested wheat. The moment the two armies clashed, the soldiers of Meng Shijiao's Whitestone army and the Tang army began to fall like wooden stakes. Chapter 562. Chapter 562, Introduction, Press Forward. Without waiting for the battle to fully unfold, Jelifeng waved his hand, and another wave of White Stone Legion pressed forward with tens of thousands of soldiers. Shields collided with shields, and the sound of steel colliding with steel rang out. Both sides were densely packed together. Press forward. Right when the second wave of people went up, Jelifeng's third wave of people surged forward and covered the sky and earth. Don't give them a chance to breathe. Duan Wuxi, you go up and personally hold the line. Yes, Your Majesty. At Jelifeng's side was a heroic general with a white tasseled spear. He clamped the sides of his horse and immediately leapt forward. It was the commander-in-chief of White Horse Legion, Duan Wuxi. Duan Wuxi was the younger brother of Meng Shijiao's general Duan Gechuan. He was also the commander-in-chief and valiant general of White Horse Legion. The entire White Horse Legion was trained by him. Sending out Duan Wuxi at the beginning of the battle showed how much importance Jelifeng placed on this battle. Bang 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 bang. The air shook, and the rings of light rumbled. Layers of rings stacked on top of each other, pushing forward continuously. In a short period of time, the Tang dynasty's shield soldiers at the foot of the mountain were under extreme pressure. Every inch of land was covered with at least several times the number of White Stone Legion soldiers charging forward. Huge thorn-shaped rings of light intertwined with each other, rumbling and shaking continuously. Battle cries rang out incessantly. Jelifeng didn't use any tricks. He just relied on his advantage in numbers to continuously press against the Annam Protectorate on the mountain. A single White Stone Legion soldier wasn't a match for the Annam Protectorate at all, be it in terms of strength, speed, or agility. However, when the numbers reached a certain level, the quantitative change would lead to a qualitative change, and everything would be different. Let's see what they do. At the foot of the mountain, Jelifeng, Huishu Wuzong, and Daluan Ruozan all looked at the top of the mountain silently. Everyone was silently waiting for the Annam Protectorate's response. The steel walls at the top of the mountain looked like a fortress. It looked like a city, but it was not a city. Even Jelifeng and Huishu Wuzong had never seen such a situation before. The two of them couldn't figure out Wang Chang's pulse at all. The first wave was a test. What do you think they will do? Jelifeng suddenly said. How to do it? You'll know soon enough. Huishu Wuzong narrowed his eyes. In Zhangqiu Jianxiong's era, these two ambitious and ruthless figures of the southwest had always kept each other in check. But after Zhangqiu Jianxiong's era, these two ambitious and ruthless figures of the southwest actually stood together to deal with the Tang dynasty. The White Stone Legion is a legion that I trained. Its defense is extremely strong. No matter what tricks they have up their sleeves, they will be greatly discounted in front of the White Stone Legion. As long as we can break through their defenses and destroy the Annam Protectorate, the entire southwest of the Tang dynasty will be our world. This will be our final battle. Jelifeng said, gazing at the top of the mountain. The final battle. After eliminating these enemies before them, the entire southwest of the Tang dynasty would be the world of Uzun and Meng Shizhao. At this time, even Jelifeng couldn't conceal the excitement in his heart. Everything he had hoped for would become a reality tomorrow. Don't be too careless. A voice came from the side. It was Huishu Wuzong's voice. What? With our army of 500,000, do you think we can't destroy the last of their troops? Jelifeng frowned and said. Huishu Wuzong was Uzun's general. He was incomparably brave. Jelifeng originally thought that Huishu Wuzong would agree with his point of view. However, he didn't expect that Huishu Wuzong's attitude was completely different from what he had imagined. I didn't say that we can't destroy them. I only said that we need to be cautious. I have a feeling that this matter won't go as smoothly as we think. Huishu Wuzong said calmly. For some reason, Huishu Wuzong had a bad feeling in his heart. Perhaps it was because the Tang people at the top of the mountain were too quiet. Perhaps it was because in Huishu Wuzong's heart, the Annam Protectorate had fled all the way but chose to stop here only because there was a mountain here. In short, maintain sufficient vigilance. Don't be careless, bang bang bang. On the mountain slope, the shields kept colliding with each other, and the sound of explosions was endless. Kill! Kill! Tens of thousands of White Stone Legion soldiers roared as they pressed forward. Squeaking sounds could be heard without end. Hold! Hold! On the mountain slope, the Annam Protectorate was constantly being squeezed down. One by one, the soldiers held onto their shields and kept retreating. Bang bang! Stones exploded beneath their feet, the enormous pressure causing the feet of these frontline shield-bearers to sink deeply into the earth and rocks. It seemed that the collapse of the front line was only a matter of time. Cack-lack. The sound of shields rubbing against each other caused the faces of the Tang dynasty soldiers to turn red. At the base of the mountain, Jelifeng, Duangechuan, Fenjie, Daluan Ruozan, and Huishu Wuzong were all looking up at the summit. As long as the Tang dynasty soldiers on the front line could no longer hold out, everyone would rush in and attack the summit in one fell swoop. It's about time. Wang Chong looked down from his vantage point at the entangled Tang dynasty, Meng Shizhao, and Uzun soldiers, and his gaze slowly turned sharp. Jelifeng and Huishu Wuzong were using the White Stone Legion to test him. But wasn't Wang Chong also testing him? Bang! With a heavy wave of his right hand, the Meng Shi Yusang army suddenly found itself caught off guard. Just when the Annam Protectorate and the Meng Shi Yusang army were in a stalemate, on the verge of collapse. Rumble. The outermost Annam Protectorate in the first circle suddenly collapsed, tens of thousands of soldiers fleeing in all directions. Buzz. The White Stone Legion soldiers in the innermost circle were all dumbfounded. What's going on here? At the base of the mountain, Jelifeng's expression flickered. Although he had also hoped that the Annam Protectorate would fail, he had not expected such a crushing defeat. This was happening much earlier than he had anticipated. But before he had time to think, the White Stone Legion surged forward. Wait! Jelifeng wanted to say something, but it was too late. The tens of thousands of White Stone Legion soldiers surged forward, throwing their formation into complete chaos. Kill! Kill them! Kill these Tang people, and the southwest will be our world. The sight of the Annam Protectorate being routed on the front lines had everyone going crazy. With the Tang people in the front and the White Stone Legion in the back, it was like a chase. But no one noticed that other than the soldiers on the front lines being routed, all the Tang dynasty soldiers on the summit remained motionless. Begin. He waved his right hand, and before the Whitestone Corps soldiers could react, countless Tang soldiers had charged in from the left and right flanks. Boom! 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 The first wave to arrive was not the Tang dynasty infantry, but the sound of tens of thousands of ballistae. These ballistae were all hidden behind the steel walls. From the foot of the mountain, no one could see them at all. Pft, pft, pft. Before the White Stone Legion could react, cold light flashed in the air, and the ballista bolts, flickering with the cold light of death, swarmed toward them. There wasn't even time to dodge, and the soldiers of the Whitestone Corps were cut down one after another like wheat being cut down. The surging stellar energy and the thorny halos could not stop the ballista bolts at all. Ah! Screams rang out incessantly as tens of thousands of White Stone Legion soldiers fell in droves. Each ballista bolt pierced through at least 10 to 20 soldiers. Under normal circumstances, these ballistae would not have been able to cause so much damage if they were wielding large shields. But when a group of people swarmed forward, they were so densely packed that it was impossible for them to fall. And the dense crowd allowed the ballista bolts to display their full power. Retreat! Retreat! Run! Ballista bolts! This is an ambush. Everyone retreat. Chapter 563. Shields. Shields. Shields, the leaders of the White Stone Legion screamed at the top of their lungs. But it was too late. Boom! Just as one of the White Stone Legion leaders screamed, the air whistled and a huge axe appeared. It spun violently and slashed into the head of the White Stone Legion soldier. Kill! A series of earth-shattering battle cries came from all directions. The frontline shieldbearers of the Annam Protectorate had already been defeated. But suddenly, countless axemen charged in from both sides. The huge axes glinted coldly in the air. Anyone who saw them could not help but feel their eyelids twitch. Boom! 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 The flying axes flew out like raindrops and slashed into the formation of the White Stone Legion. Bang! 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 Countless soldiers of the Whitestone Corps groaned as they toppled to the ground in pools of blood. Hold on! Hold on! Hold on! The generals of the White Stone Legion shouted frantically. There were not many Annam Protectorate soldiers charging in from both sides. At least, their numbers were far less than the White Lion Legion. If they could withstand the frenzied assault of the Annam Protectorate, the situation could be changed. It's too late. On the mountain peak, Wang Chong looked down from above. His robes fluttered in the wind and his lips curled into a cold smile. The armies of this era were still stuck in the pursuit of numbers. They did not know what the true art of war was. No matter what army, no matter how strong they were, if they only knew how to charge and kill, they were just a motley crew. Against well-trained opponents who advanced and retreated as one, there was no way they could resist. Boom! 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 The short victory on the battlefield quickly turned into a one-sided harvest. Thousands of Annam Protectorate soldiers charged down from the mountain peak. The White Stone Legion soldiers could not withstand them at all. This test was reversed in a short period of time. Retreat! Retreat! At the foot of the mountain, the face of the commander of the White Stone Legion, Duan Wuxia, darkened. He had built the White Stone Legion himself, but he had never expected it to end up like this. Pass down my order. Reserve troops, prepare to press forward. Duan Wuxia roared in exasperation. But before Duan Wuxia could deploy his reserve troops, when the Tang army reached the edge of the mountain, the pursuit came to a sudden halt. Tens of thousands of soldiers seemed to have been frozen. All the soldiers stopped as if there was an invisible line there. Everyone was uniform as if they were one person. The spearmen and axemen were the first to retreat. Behind the army, the previously defeated shieldbearers once again emerged. Clang 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 clang. Huge metal shields, each taller than a man, once again stood erect like a wall at the foot of the mountain. The shieldbearers were at the front, and the spearmen were at the back. It was as if the battle had never happened. Other than the corpses that littered the ground, there was no other evidence that this battle had ever taken place. Silence. Absolute silence. Jelifeng's and Daluan Ruozen's gazes turned nasty as they watched the orderly Annam Protectorate on the slope. On the side, Huishu Wuzong narrowed his eyes, his expression turning grim. In last night's battle, he had been lured away by Wang Chong, and he had sensed Wang Chong's crafty schemes throughout the entire process. Wang Chong's cavalry had never once directly clashed with him. By the time he arrived at the battlefield, the Annam Protectorate had already safely withdrawn. This was Huishu Wuzong's first time seeing Wang Chong's command in a frontal battle. In this battle, neither side had mobilized their entire army. The Mengshi, Yusang army had only mobilized a portion of the White Stone Legion, which could not be considered their true strength. But on the summit, the Tang army had only mobilized a portion of the army at the foot of the mountain. From the middle of the mountain up, the rest of the Tang army had not moved. From start to finish, even in the most intense moments of the battle, they had not taken part. There was no question that this probing battle had resulted in a massive defeat for the Mengshi, Yusang side. Bastard! Jelifeng stared at the Tang army on the mountain, his entire body trembling in anger. The White Stone Legion was one of the elite forces he had trained, and he had placed high hopes on Duan Wuji. He had never expected them to be so easily defeated, and in front of Daluan Ruozen and Huishu Wuzong. Just what is this bastard doing? Zhelyuofeng was infuriated. In yesterday's battle, Uzun had lost 2 battles and lost more than 50,000 soldiers. While Jelifeng appeared fine on the surface and pretended not to care, deep inside, he was still somewhat disapproving. How was Duan Wuji's current performance any different from Uzun's? In front of Daluan Ruozen and Huishu Wuzong, he had lost all face. Your Majesty, there's no need to be angry. This was only a probing battle. It doesn't mean anything. Daluan Ruozen shook his head and continued. Huishu Wuzong, this is your domain. What say you? He turned to Huishu Wuzong. This brat isn't simple. Huishu Wuzong was quiet for some time before speaking, his expression grave. The current Annam Protectorate in his hands is completely different from before. This battle will be rather troublesome. Ah! Upon hearing this, Daluan Ruozen's eyebrows twitched uncontrollably. The relaxed smile on his face instantly disappeared. Daluan Ruozen and Huishu Wuzong had known each other for a long time, but he rarely saw such an expression on his face. He had never heard him say the word troublesome. Huishu Wuzong had a ferocious and combative personality. When he encountered a powerful opponent, he would only think of ways to defeat it. He would never think of any trouble. No trouble. Is this brat really that powerful? Daluan Ruozen's eyebrows slowly furrowed. He didn't know much about military matters, but if Huishu Wuzong was so cautious, then the nature of the matter was completely different. At the same time, the mood on the summit was completely different from the mood at the base of the mountain. Just as the battle was over, a familiar voice descended from the heavens like a sweet rain. Before the casualties of this battle had even been counted, Wang Chong already knew how many Mengshi Zhao had lost. In just a few moments, Mengshi Zhao had lost more than 8,000 soldiers. Wonderful! Chen Shusun looked down at the silent Mengshi, Yusang army with an excited expression. It was no wonder that Chen Shusun found it difficult to maintain his composure. In this battle, Mengshi Zhao and Uzun had come with a torrential momentum. Their army of 500,000 covered the mountains and plains, exerting an enormous pressure. Although no one said anything, everyone, including Chen Shusun, felt the pressure weighing down on them. The Annam Protectorate had failed far too many times in the southwest. This battle was extremely important. If they failed in the first round, not only would the Mengshi, Yusang army advance, the morale of the Tang dynasty would also crumble. They were already at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers. If they failed in the first round, the morale of the army would be dealt a fatal blow. But as long as they could win, their mentality would be completely different. The two commanders of the army, Xianyu Zhongtong and Wang Yan, had remained unmoved. Half of the army had not participated in the battle, and this in itself was a manifestation of their strength. Wang Chong only faintly smiled, saying nothing. This was just the first test. It wasn't much at all. Alas, just a little bit more. This thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind as he looked down the mountain. Chapter 564. Pass on my order. Tell them not to get careless. This is only a test. The battle is still far from beginning. Wang Chong said. The first battle was extremely important, directly affecting the morale of the army. They had always been lacking in numbers, and if morale was lacking, the battle would truly be lost before it had even begun. But 8,000 some soldiers were nothing. Compared to the 500,000 soldiers of the Mengshi, Yusang army, this was truly a drop in the bucket. To the menacing Mengshi, Yusang army, it wasn't even enough to float a bubble. In addition, don't get careless. Uzun and Mengshi Zhao have imperial great generals on the level of Hushu Wuzong and Duan Gechuan commanding them, and they have yet to move out. Yes, young master. Your subordinate understands. I will pass on young master's order. Chen Shusun bowed, a serious expression on his face. The 500,000 soldiers of the Mengshi, Yusang army and the two great generals that had yet to move out, Hushu Wuzong and Duan Gechuan, meant that the situation of this battle was truly grim, far from being optimistic. It's about time. Pass on my order. Prepare to carry out the second plan. It's about time for Jelifeng and Daluan Ruozhen to move out. Wang Chong looked down at the slightly disorderly Mengshi, Yusang army and suddenly said. In the fierce winds, the mood on the battlefield was far more intense than anyone had imagined. Jelifeng and Daluan Ruozhen had moved far faster than anyone had imagined. Everything was as Wang Chong had predicted. 8,000 some casualties truly were not a serious blow to the Mengshi, Yusang army of 500,000. Get ready. Jelifeng's expression was extremely cold. Tell Duan Wuxi to have all the soldiers of the White Stone Legion throw in the battle. The entire Annam Protectorate doesn't even have 100,000 soldiers left. I don't believe that my 100,000 White Stone Legion can't open a gap in the Annam Protectorate. Yes, your subordinate will go. Wait. Tell Duan Wuxi that this time, I want him to lead the army and be the commander. Jelifeng said coldly. More than 70% of the Annam Protectorate's forces had not been mobilized at all. Only a small portion of the forces stationed at the foot of the mountain had been mobilized. Under such circumstances, Duan Wuxi still failed in front of everyone. It was a crushing defeat. Jelifeng was obviously extremely dissatisfied. Tell Duan Wuxi that if the communists retreat, do not recklessly follow them. Unless we can confirm that the Tang army is truly routed. Suddenly, a cold and emotionless voice rang in everyone's ears. Yes, my lord. Hearing this voice, the others didn't react, but the guard who passed the order stiffened. He quickly put his hands together and bowed respectfully. He seemed to be very afraid. Along with that voice, the surrounding temperature also dropped significantly. This Duan Gechuan has quite a good eye. He's hit the nail on the head. Not far from Jelifeng, no one noticed a strange light flash through the eyes of Daluan Ruozhen and Hushu Wuzong. This youth of the Tang dynasty called Wang Chong used a military strategy that was completely different from the other military commanders they knew of. A battle between two armies was a contest of spirit and courage, a contest of who could break through the defenses of the other side. This sort of method of intentionally showing weakness and retreating in order to advance was completely unheard of and unseen. Even Daluan Ruozhen and Hushu Wuzong, who were ambitious and ruthless figures of the southwest, had never seen such a thing before. As the great general of Mengshi Zhao, Duan Gechuan had always lived in seclusion behind the scenes, rarely revealing himself. He had acutely noticed that the White Stone Legion's recent defeat was due to the Tang army showing weakness. This was completely in line with their own views. However, Duan Gechuan only said these words before standing motionlessly behind Zhao Yuofeng like a lifeless statue, no longer making a sound. Thump thump thump. As the war drums rumbled, the vast sea of Mengshi Zhao soldiers at the base of the mountain began to move as well. With the rumbling of the war drums, the vanguard of the army began to move once more. In a few short moments, the Whitestone Corps, with the towering mountain at the center as the center, quickly arranged themselves into orderly square formations. All soldiers, hear my order. Rolling stone formation. Gallop gallop galloped. Following a resounding sound, a tall and sturdy figure wielding a long sword raised high walked out from the back of the formation. With Duan Wuxi's order, one figure after another, each of them brimming with majestic auras, slowly walked out of the formation and to the very front of the formation. These White Stone Legion commanders had all walked to the very front of the battle line. Boom! With a metallic clatter, a massive jade-white halo of thorns began to spread out from under the feet of Duan Wuxi's horse and spread to the feet of the other White Stone Legion soldiers. Then, like some sort of signal, one halo of thorns after another began to spread out from under the feet of the other White Stone Legion commanders, reinforcing the entire army. Countless halos vibrated as if they were one entity. When the aura of 100,000 White Stone Legion gathered together, it suddenly turned into a beam of light, majestically soaring into the sky. Buzz! The void distorted. Under the gaze of countless people, a huge white boulder the size of a mountain once again appeared in the void. Fight! 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 With a series of earth-shattering shouts, the White Stone Legion once again gathered, standing like a wall, and pushed toward the top of the mountain. However, unlike the first time, this time, the White Stone Legion's advancement was significantly slower, but the momentum and pressure they created did not decrease but increased instead. Duan Wuxi. On the hillside, the commanders of the Anam Protectorate frowned. The White Stone Legion's attack power was definitely not the strongest among the legions of Mengshi Zhao, but their defensive ability was definitely the strongest. In the Battle of Irai, everyone had already experienced their strength. And as the leader of the White Stone Legion, the commander who created this army that perfectly imitated the style of the Tang dynasty, Duan Wuxi had long become the enemy of the Anam Protectorate's generals. Especially when they remembered that it was actually the Anam Protectorate's generals who taught Mengshi Zhao this method. If it was used against them, one could imagine how they would feel. Duan Wuxi, I'll fight you. Nay. The warhorse neighed, and in the blink of an eye, a pitch-black steed that was at least a size larger than the other steeds leaped out from the hillside, its mane trembling. With a single leap, it covered a distance of 70 to 80 feet. Rumble. A trail of smoke and dust billowed, accompanied by endless thorns and flames. The Anam Protectorate general had already leaped down the hill. Beneath his body, a huge halo was vibrating and rapidly spreading forward as he moved. General Zhao, I'm here to help you. Hum. Immediately after, the Anam Protectorate's generals leaped out one after another, stirring up a trail of smoke and dust as they charged down the hill together with the leader of the cavalry. Who is that person? Wang Chong raised his eyebrows slightly and asked without turning his head. He only said that he needed the cooperation of a high-ranking general who could lead an army, but he had no idea who the General Xian Yuzhongtong had arranged for him was. That is General Zhao Wujiang. He is a veteran general of the Anam Protectorate. Back then, under the order of the Holy Emperor, the Anam Protectorate sent some generals to support and teach the Mengshi Zhao army the art of war. Zhao Wujiang was one of the generals who accompanied them. Back then, whether it was Zhao Wujiang or Duan Wuxi, their ranks in the army were not high, and they were still very young. Back then, Zhao Wujiang and Duan Wuzong were bosom buddies, best friends. Many of Duan Wuxi's art of war were actually taught by Zhao Wujiang. Zhao Wujiang taught him almost everything he knew. To a certain extent, the White Stone Legion was trained by Zhao Wujiang. There is almost no one in the Annan Protectorate who doesn't know this. In the Battle of Irai, we suffered heavy losses, and many of our heavy weapons and crossbows were unable to display their power. This is inextricably linked to the White Stone Legion. Chen Shusun gazed at the figure at the foot of the mountain and sighed, his heart heavy. So it's him. A thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind. The Annan Protectorate was a heavily fortified area in the southwest of the empire, and it had many generals. In this aspect, neither Mengshi Zhao nor Uzun could compare. This was a matter of the empire's military reserves. Mengshi Zhao and Uzun were barren wastelands of the art of war. In this aspect, they could not compare to the Tang dynasty. Because there were so many generals, it was impossible for Wang Chong to understand them one by one. However, among all the generals, Zhao Wujiang was definitely one of the most influential existences. Even back then, Wang Chong had heard of his name. This person had done very little, and his cultivation was not as powerful as Xian Yu Zhongtong's, much less an imperial great general of Zhangzhou Jianxiong's level. But one thing was certain, Zhao Wujiang was a fierce general not one bit inferior to Duan Wuji. In the army, there are fathers and sons, but on the battlefield, there are no brothers. Zhao Wujiang and Duan Wuji were once good brothers, but they single-handedly brought about the current situation of the Tang dynasty in the southwest. Now that Duan Wuji has appeared, he truly is more than enough to hold the line. Wang Chong quietly said to himself. The art of war was like the art of chess. Soldier against soldier, general against general. Wang Chong had no understanding of Zhao Wujiang's abilities, nor had he ever interacted with him before. But none of this was important, because starting from now, the true manipulator of the war was no longer Zhao Wujiang, but himself. The affairs of the world are like chess, and the art of war is like chess. Whether it's soldiers or generals, they are all chess pieces on the board. Daluan Ruozhen, Jelifeng, come, let me see just how capable you are. Wang Chong looked down the mountain and waved his hand. Buzz! The mountain quaked. This time, more than a third of the Tang army, nearly 30,000 soldiers, began to advance, preparing for the second round of battle. Bang! 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 Looking down from the sky, one after another dazzling war halos were like ripples on the surface of a lake during a rainstorm. They continuously spread out from one point on the battlefield in all directions. The halo of charge, the halo of defense, the halo of black iron, the halo of tenacity, the halo of reckless bull, the halo of offense, the halo of strength, tens of thousands of war halos joined together to cover the entire mountain. Bzzz. The entire mountain seemed to have become an impenetrable fortress, exuding an intimidating aura. Kill! 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 The metal shields slammed into the ground, causing the earth to rumble and all the Annan Protectorate army soldiers to roar in unison. The first battle had just ended, but the second battle was already upon them, and it was happening much faster than they had imagined. Nay! Boom! With the fierce neighing of warhorses, the vast sea of White Stone Legion and the Annan Protectorate on the mountain once more collided like two tides. Rumble! The moment the two armies collided, the entire earth began to groan. This did not seem like a battle between two armies, but more like a clash between two prehistoric beasts. Chapter 565. On the fierce battlefield, the strength of an individual had been weakened to the extreme. What was more important was the strength and cooperation of the army as a whole. In this battle, if the Annan Protectorate was a sturdy dam, then the White Stone Legion was the most ferocious wave, one wave after another. Although the Annan Protectorate army had the advantage in numbers and their training methods were extremely similar, in this battle, the individual quality and overall strength of the Annan Protectorate army, as well as the teamwork between soldiers, had completely surpassed the Whitestone Corps, displaying an absolute advantage. Going up and down the slope, the tens of thousands of Tang soldiers, with the help of the steel walls that Wang Chong had brought, were perfectly distributed across the mountain range, displaying an unbelievable defensive strength. On the battlefield, it often required 3 or more soldiers of the White Stone Legion to put pressure on a Tang army. If they wanted to break through, they would need even more troops. On the plains, this sort of fighting strength was simply unimaginable. General has ordered that no one dares to retreat. Behead without exception. General has ordered that for every enemy killed, 10 taels of gold will be rewarded. For killing 10 enemies, you will be rewarded with the title of nobility and your heirs will be protected. On the fierce battlefield, a White Stone Legion officer with a scar on his face shouted himself hoarse. Aiming at a soldier in the crowd who was thinking of retreating, he lashed out with his whip, shattering that soldier's armor and sending him flying with a scream. Dusker Luochi was a famous supervisor of the White Stone Legion. In battle, if he saw someone retreating, he would never hold back. This time, the commander-in-chief of the White Stone Legion, Duan Wuxia, was personally taking the field. All the officers followed him, including Dusker Luochi. The officers suddenly became like an impenetrable fortress. Everyone was under pressure, and it was hard to tell how many officers were crazily supervising the battle like Dusker Luochi. First and second teams, combine forces. Shields open the way, spearmen in the rear. Whoever can break through the Tang formation first will be heavily rewarded. Third and fourth teams, substitute. Don't retreat. His Majesty is supervising the battle from behind. Whoever dares to retreat will have their entire family executed. They're just putting on a brave front. They're no match for us. We know all of their training. If we can defeat them once, we can definitely defeat them twice, or even thrice. 100,000 soldiers. 100,000 soldiers. Our White Stone Legion has 100,000 soldiers while the Tang regiments on the mountain range only have 100,000 at most. We don't believe that we can't break through their defense line with so many people. Charge! Charge! Steady! Hold on! All the generals of the White Stone Legion were supervising the battle from the front. Thorny halos flashed in the sky one after another. Unlike the first wave of attack, the White Stone Legion went all out this time. Compared to the frequent movements of the Whitestone Corps, the Annan Protectorate Army was far less complicated. Giant shield formation. Spearmen, get ready. Ready for battle at any time. As the model for the White Stone Legion, the Annan Protectorate was far less complicated. If the Tang dynasty claimed to be number 2 in infantry battles, no one in the world would dare claim to be number 1. In this aspect, they didn't even need much guidance from Wang Chong. Not bad. On the summit, Wang Chong nodded to himself at this sight. The Annan Protectorate had always been a well-trained army, and the Battle of Irai had eliminated many of the weaker soldiers, leaving behind only the elite of the elite. The greatest advantage of this elite was their individual strength, rich battlefield experience, and proficiency in teamwork. Most importantly, they had a strong ability to execute battle tactics. In the entire world, there was no general who didn't need subordinates that could command such a well-trained, highly capable, and elite army. Wang Chong had always believed in one thing: the quality of an army was first and foremost, and only quantity could be ensured. But if he could only choose one of the two, a well-trained and high-quality army was the best choice. Whether it was logistics, fighting power, or the pressure on the empire, they could all be minimized. In the entire world, the Anxi Protectorate Army commanded by Gao Xianji and Feng Changqing, the twin paragons of the empire, is the strongest. It only has around 30,000 soldiers, but they are armed to the teeth with ballistae and weapons. Moreover, these 30,000 soldiers can be mounted on foot, and each soldier has a warhorse. Most importantly, they often cooperate with the cavalry of the kingdoms of Anxi, so they are extremely familiar with the tactics of nomadic tribes. Together with the elite, valiant, and strongest soldiers of the empire, the 30,000 regular soldiers, the 20,000 reserve soldiers in the rear of the Chishi Desert, and the more than 100,000 soldiers from the small kingdoms of the western regions that obey the orders of the Tang dynasty, this army is completely capable of intimidating the hundreds of thousands of enemy soldiers. It's undeniable that the Anxi Protectorate army is the strongest in terms of fighting power. But below the Anxi Protectorate army, it's probably not much inferior to the Big Dipper army commanded by Geshu Han of Longxi. Wang Chong quietly said to himself. Geshu Han's Big Dipper army was so powerful that it had stopped countless attacks from the Yuzhan Empire. Yet the mighty Yuzhan Empire had been unable to do anything to him, unable to advance east even when Geshu Han was standing in its way. One could easily imagine the strength of the Big Dipper army. Of all the protectorate armies of the Tang dynasty, only the Annam Protectorate had the fewest battles. For this reason, the Annam Protectorate was the weakest of all the protectorates. But after the Battle of Irai, the 180,000 soldiers of the Annam Protectorate had been eliminated, and the remaining 60,000 had become the elite of the elite. Their fighting power had risen instead of falling. A single person could command 60,000 of the purest Annam Protectorate elites, add on the thousands of Annam Protectorate generals, and add on the 2 fierce generals of his father and Xian Yuzhongtong. This was an extravagant dream that Wang Chong had never dreamed of. In the War of the Southwest, he could still maintain such a complete army. This was something that Wang Chong had never dared to imagine before. Daluan Ruozhen, Huishu Wuzong, Jelifeng, Duan Gichuan, as long as I am here, you will never be able to cross this mountain. And you will never be able to wreak havoc in the southwest like you did in the past. Ambition comes with a price, and the greater the ambition, the greater the price. Now, it's time for you to pay that price. Let us see just who will be the final victor of the southwest. Wang Chong's robes flapped in the wind as he looked down the mountain, a harsh light in his eyes. Rumble. With a heaven-shaking boom, a white figure, man and horse, flashing with thorns, slashed into the Annam Protectorate's defense line like a massive sword. Aya! With an earth-shattering explosion, the giant metal shield, as well as the shield-bearers and spear-bearers behind it, were all sent flying like kites with their strings cut. The great Tang defense line that had held out for so long had been broken in a flash. All soldiers, charge! Chapter 566. With Duan Wuji personally leading the charge, the White Stone Legion was completely different from before. Compared to before, the destructive power and charging power they displayed were completely different. I don't believe that 100,000 White Stone Legion can't break through the camp of these defeated generals. Everyone, follow me. Whoever dares to retreat will be executed without exception. Duan Wuji waved his long sword. Behind him, all the personal guards of the White Stone Legion formed a dense formation and surged forward like the tide. In front of Daluan Ruozhen and Huishu Wuzong, he was easily defeated by the Tang dynasty and reprimanded by Jelifeng. Duan Wuji's heart was filled with arrogance and anger. Kaboom! Duan Wuzong's dantian trembled, and the rolling gang qi transformed into millions of propitious qi that shot out. Duan Wuzong sat on his divine chariot and raised his long sword. The void behind him changed, and a Buddha holding a medicine basket appeared. Bang bang bang! The void trembled and balls of light shot out from the surroundings of the son of Buddha. The light changed and turned into a medicinal pestle, a medicinal pot, a medicinal stone, a medicinal bottle, a medicinal vat, and many other kinds of instruments. It was the Medicine King of Irai legend. The religion of Irai's 6 Zhao was completely different from that of the Central Plains. Everything had its own system. The Medicine King was the medicine god and the god of strength of Irai. Duan Wuji cultivated the Medicine King, and everyone in Mengshi Zhao knew about it. Kaboom! Duan Wuji activated the Medicine King, and a huge halo of thorns surged, with Duan Wuji as the center, constantly vibrating and rotating. In an instant, the earth and mountains shook. Duan Wuxi's robes fluttered, and the hair on his temples fluttered. In an instant, a majestic, storm-like aura exploded from his body. Boom, the halo shook lightly, and within a radius of more than 10 zhang, all the shield soldiers of the Anam Protectorate had their bones broken, and like kites with their strings cut, they flew in all directions. Everyone, advance. With Duan Wuxi at the center, and all the White Stone Legion generals supporting him, the entire legion was like a giant spider web, and they rolled toward the summit. Boom, boom, boom. Dust billowed, and screams rang out. Not a single person in the mighty Annan Protectorate army had been able to stop Duan Wuzong. Kill! With Duan Wuzong leading the way, the morale of the Whitestone soldiers soared, all of them shouting as they followed Duan Wuzong up the mountain. Although Wang Chong had brought a large number of war machines from the capital and had constructed steel walls along the sides of the mountain, these steel walls were only meant for cavalry. They were of little use against infantry, and at the very least, they were of little use against the Whitestone Corps. Rumble. Like a breaching dam, a gap appeared in the impregnable Tang dynasty defense line, and under Duan Wuxi's lead, this gap continued to grow. Not bad. Uncle Duan is truly doing his best. At the base of the mountain, Crown Prince Fenjie watched the battle on the summit, a hint of surprise in his eyes. Behind him, Jelifeng, Duan Gechuan, and the others also nodded their heads. It's better to provoke the general into action than to invite the general, was one of the most ancient proverbs of the art of war. With Duan Wuxi personally taking the field, the White Stone Legion's performance was on a completely different level. The White Stone Legion truly does have some strength. Although they can't compare to Uzun's cavalry, they're still an elite force to be reckoned with. On the other side, Daluan Ruozhen and Huishu Wuzong said nothing, but they inwardly nodded in agreement. Daluan Ruozhen and Huishu Wuzong had not witnessed the Battle of Irai, only learning of the result after the battle. In truth, when the news of the defeat of the Anam Protectorate arrived, the two of them had been rather surprised. There was no doubt that the Mengshi Zhao Empire under Jelifeng's rule was completely different from any other time. The fighting strength they displayed was ample proof of this point. Ruor. Kaiyil. Follow the general and kill all the Tang people. All the soldiers of the White Stone Legion seemed to have been injected with a shot of adrenaline, roaring as they charged up the mountain. On the slope, the Tang dynasty was in an extremely bad situation. This was different from the first time. The first time, the Tang dynasty had held out for a very long time before collapsing, but this time, the speed at which the defense line crumbled was much faster than anyone had imagined. Leading the way is a good thing, but the hard is easy to break. A mighty commander of an army should learn to charge into enemy lines before the outcome of the battle is clear and risk danger. This isn't a wise decision. On both sides, on the entire mountain, the only person who remained calm and unmoved was Wang Chong. Duan Wuxi had led the way, raising the morale and drive of the White Stone Legion. It was an astonishing sight, but in Wang Chong's eyes, it wasn't even worth a glance. All he has is courage and strength, but no foresight. This Duan Wuxi can't even be considered a third-rate general. Wang Chong quietly said to himself. For a general to personally lead the charge was definitely a strategic necessity, not just because the sovereign above had ordered it or to tear apart a section of the Tang army's battle line. In Wang Chong's view, Duan Wuxi's grasp of the art of war was probably not even that of an ordinary general. If the commander-in-chief of an army never moved and always led the charge in every battle, then what difference was there between a general and a soldier? Boom! Duan Wuxi's massive charge did not last for very long. Boom! Just when Duan Wuxi's momentum was at its fiercest, there was a massive boom as Duan Wuxi's unstoppable charge came to a screeching halt, like a flood meeting a dam, or a gale meeting a steep cliff. In the middle of the vast army, between two lofty steel walls, a stalwart figure stood like a pillar that held up the heavens, blocking Duan Wuxi's attack and also blocking the path of the White Stone Legion. A single general, a single black horse, had been able to block Duan Wuxi's unstoppable momentum. Duan Wu. Every word was squeezed out through clenched teeth. The sound of gnashing teeth could be heard, and every word was squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth. His red cloak flapping in the wind, the dark-faced general held his saber in front of him. His icy eyes glared viciously at Duan Wuzong, who was charging down the mountain, as if he wanted to eat him alive. Zhao Wujiang. Duan Wuxi's expression froze when he saw the general who had appeared out of nowhere. But very quickly, a monstrous murderous aura erupted from his body. When two armies fight, they each serve their own masters. Zhao Wujiang, don't blame me. Those who stand in my way will die. Rumble. The massive ring of light shuddered and exploded with a heaven-shaking rumble. Duan Wuzong's body exploded with a brilliant light, and he swung his long sword. In the air behind him, the medicine monarch's eyes narrowed, and countless medicine jars, pestles, and jars, each as heavy as a mountain, bombarded Zhao Wujiang like a storm. Boom! One of the medicine jars brushed past a steel wall that weighed several thousand kilograms, directly tearing it apart and sending it flying. Buzz! There was a flash of light, and all of the attacking medicinal stones, jars, and jars seemed to hit an invisible wall. They stopped when they were still 3 or 4 meters away from Zhao Wujiang, hovering in the air. The destructive medicinal stones, jars, and jars formed from stellar energy were completely unable to get within several meters of Zhao Wujiang. Traitor! If I had known that you would rebel today, I would have killed you back then. Zhao Wujiang's eyes were bloodshot, and they spat out towering flames of fury. Boom! A bloody flame flashed, and all of the medicinal stones, jars, and pestles formed from stellar energy were incinerated like wildfire, vanishing into nothingness. The bloody flame rebounded and fiercely collided with Duan Wuxi's stellar energy. Rumble! A scorching essence chi shot into the sky, accompanied by the rumbling of metal. The stellar energy on Zhao Wujiang and Duan Wuxi's bodies violently collided. In the blink of an eye, the moment the stellar energy collided, the two leaped forward. Clang! Saber and sword clashed, the horrifying stellar energy flames accompanied by the clashing of the halo of thorns instantly causing a violent explosion. Around the two, both the soldiers of the Tang dynasty and the White Stone Legion had no time to react or dodge. Screams rang out as they were sent flying. Kill! Kill! Behind Zhao Wujiang, the other generals of the Annam Protectorate unsheathed their swords and roared, leading the vast Annam Protectorate soldiers down the mountain. At almost the same time, the generals of the White Stone Legion arrived. In the entire War of the Southwest, the two armies with the most similar styles and the deepest grudges were locked in a fierce battle. It's enough. At the summit of the mountain, Wang Chong slowly withdrew his gaze and looked in another direction. A battle between two generals would not decide the outcome of a war. The moment Zhao Wujiang appeared and intercepted Duan Wuxi, the entire war had taken a different direction, the next phase. Now it's my turn. Jelafeng, Duan Gechuan, this time, your White Stone Legion won't just lose 8,000 some soldiers. Wang Chong coldly smiled as he gazed at those two unmoving figures at the base of the mountain. Etiquette would never be able to enlighten an opponent. Only war could leave an indelible mark. The empire's southwest had already paid a heavy price in the early stages, and now, it was finally time for them to pay the price for their actions. Although Wang Chong's current cultivation level was still not worth mentioning, the art of war had always been a contest of wits. Jelafeng, Duan Gechuan, Fengjie, and even Daluan Ruozhen and Huishu Wuzong, no matter what glorious pasts these foreign warlords had, no matter what ambitions they had for the Tang dynasty, Wang Chong would let them know what the might of a war saint was. Only the most painful of lessons could make these foreign titans learn to respect the Tang dynasty. Pass on my order. Begin the operation. Wang Chong waved his right hand, waving the command flag. Chapter 567. Boom! The blood-red banner fluttered above the summit and then suddenly fell. A moment later, the mountain slope suddenly changed. The Annan Protectorate, which had been desperately resisting, suddenly relaxed, like a bowstring that had been pulled taut to its limit and then suddenly lost its strength. In a flash, all the White Stone Legion soldiers, except for Duan Wuxi's line of defense, subconsciously gave chase. Not good. Duan Wuxi's eyes and ears were focused on all directions. When he saw this out of the corner of his eye, his eyelids suddenly twitched. At any other time, he would have had enough time to stop this, but at this time, Duan Wuxi had only just opened his mouth to speak when a blood-red light washed over him. A massive saber slashed down with destructive energy, cleaving the heavens and splitting the earth. Rumble. Stellar energy vibrated as the two tyrannical energies collided, transforming into a sharp pillar of energy that was several zhang thick. The order that Duan Wuxi had been about to spit out was instantly swallowed by Zhao Wujiang's saber. Retreat immediately. Don't pursue. At the base of the mountain, Crown Prince Fenjie trembled as he saw this scene. His heart filled with panic, he involuntarily took a few steps forward. It was only when the cold wind blew that he realized what was happening. The battle cries on the summit shook the heavens, so how could he hear his own voice? Oh no! The same thing is happening again. It's this move again. At the base of the mountain, Daluan Ruozhen and Huishu Wuzong also paled. If they remembered correctly, not too long ago, the Annan Protectorate had used this exact same move to defeat the White Stone Legion. Kill! Kill! With the general holding the fort, the Annan Protectorate can't hold on much longer. The White Stone Legion soldiers at the back had no idea what was happening in front of them. They only felt that the space in front of them had loosened and immediately squeezed through. The brilliance of Wang Chong in choosing this mountain to fight the final battle was once again reflected. The incline of the slope, coupled with the layers of steel walls covering the surface of the mountain, greatly limited the vision of the soldiers at the rear, making it impossible for them to discover the battle situation in front of them in a timely manner. Furthermore, Wang Chong had changed his tactics slightly. Boom! A group of people swarmed forward, and the originally orderly formation was once again thrown into disorder. Duan Wuxi's suppressive effect immediately disappeared. Kill! On the top of the mountain, the spearmen and axemen of the Annan Protectorate formed a tight formation. When the White Stone Legion's front line fell into chaos, they stood like a wall and quickly charged over. Clang! 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 The sound of metal clashing rang out incessantly, and waves of miserable screams resounded through the clouds. An army that fought on its own, without any organization or formation, was like a mass of loose sand. In front of a regular army, it was completely vulnerable. Pooh! Pooh! Cold spears pierced through the chest and out the back. In an instant, the soldiers of the White Stone Legion could not dodge in time and fell one after another. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 100, 1,000, in the blink of an eye, thousands of soldiers of the White Stone Legion had fallen one after another. In front of the Annan Protectorate, the chaotic soldiers of the White Stone Legion could not resist at all. All troops in the rear, press forward with all your strength. All troops in the front, hold down the front line. Without orders, no one is allowed to pursue the enemy. Boom! In a flash, Duan Wuxi fiercely pushed back Zhao Wujiang with a single slash of his sword. With a turn, he pulled away, and his entire face turned green. Before the battle, he had already planned to guard against this move of the Annan Protectorate, but he did not expect that even though he was prepared, he still fell for it. Boom! In a flash of bloody light, Zhao Wujiang's saber energy followed. Duan Wuxi only had time to give this order before he was once more swept up by Zhao Wujiang's saber energy. Duan Wuxi, you still have time to give orders. You should take care of yourself first. Take a strike from me. Damn it, Zhao Wujiang, do you think you can hold me down like this? I want you dead. Duan Wuxi's furious roars reached the heavens. But no matter how angry he was, the moment Wang Chong had sent out Zhao Wujiang, his advantage had been completely nullified. But even so, Duan Wuxi's order had still been effective. The White Stone Legion had learned everything from the Tang dynasty and the Tang Protectorate army. In terms of carrying out orders, they were not much inferior to the Tang dynasty. Rear troops, follow. Advance in force. Front troops, pull back. Hold the line. Anyone who dares to charge into the formation will be immediately executed. Hurry. Anyone who dares to slack off will be dealt with according to military law. Hundreds of White Stone Legion officers revolved around Duan Wuxi's order, and orders were quickly passed down through these leaders of the White Stone Legion. In a few short moments, the White Stone Legion was divided into two groups, using the crumbling front line as a base. The crumbling White Stone Legion soldiers on the front line were cut off, and in the rear, the White Stone Legion quickly formed a new line of defense. Behind them, layers upon layers of White Stone Legion soldiers pressed forward. In the face of the 100,000 White Stone Legion soldiers, the previous wave of dispersal was completely insignificant. Duan Wuxi has already grasped the essence of commanding troops. This is no longer a simple imitation, but a true grasp of the art of changing formations, forming his own style. It seems that in the many years that Jelifeng has ruled the 6th Zhao of Irai, he truly has carried out many bold and decisive reforms. At the very least, Mengshi Zhao truly does have the strength to challenge the Annam Protectorate. Wang Chong stood on the summit, looking down at the soldiers of the White Stone Legion as they swiftly restored order and stabilized the front line. He couldn't help but nod to himself. Even as an enemy, Wang Chong had to admit that Jelifeng's rule over the 6th Zhao of Irai and Mengshi Zhao's empire to this extent had not been a fluke. The White Stone Legion led by Duan Wuxi had caused great damage to Xianyu Zhongtong's Annam Protectorate in the Irai Plains. This was definitely not a coincidence. Now, the Mengshi Zhao Empire indeed had the capital to expand its military. At the very least, in this wave of attack, the White Stone Legion was able to decisively abandon a portion of its soldiers and rebuild a new front line in a short period of time. This made the early tactical advantage of the Annam Protectorate disappear. This was not something that any legion could easily do. But unfortunately, it's still useless. Wang Chong sneered, made a hand gesture, and conveyed another order. The blood-red flag once again danced on the summit. Bang, bang, bang. All the soldiers of the White Stone Legion who had fallen into chaos and were abandoned were harvested, one by one, falling down like wooden stakes. Roar. With a roar, the sabersmen, spearmen, and axemen retreated while the shieldsmen charged forward. From the middle of the mountain, tens of thousands of Annam Protectorate soldiers once more charged at the White Stone Legion. But from the middle of the mountain up, the entire Annam Protectorate remained motionless. Xianyu Zhongtong, Wang Yan, Chen Shusun, and all the high-ranking officers of the Annam Protectorate, except for Zhao Wujiang, stood motionless from the middle of the mountain to the summit. It was like this battle had nothing to do with them. Kill! Kill! The countless Annam Protectorate soldiers once more charged at the formation of the White Stone Legion. Pressing, constantly pressing, the same scene repeated itself as tens of thousands of great Tang soldiers continued to charge forward. Without Duan Wuxi, the White Stone Legion could no longer pose a fatal threat to the Annam Protectorate. Bang! As the Annam Protectorate and the White Stone Legion charged at each other, the pressure and entanglement reaching their limits, the same thing happened once more. Retreat! Hurry and retreat! Caught off guard by the White Stone Legion, the Annam Protectorate at the very front suddenly began to retreat. And then, the strangest thing happened, the tens of thousands of soldiers of the White Stone Corps subconsciously chased after Wang Chong like a heavy fist striking the air. In just a few seconds, the orderly and disciplined White Stone Legion once more fell into the same chaos. Duluan Ruozhen, Huishu Wazang, Jelifeng, Duangachuan, Fenjie, right under the eyes of these formidable powerhouses of the southwest border, the White Stone Legion, under Wang Chang's command, once more fell into the same chaos and predicament. Hiss! At this moment, let alone these foreign powerhouses like Jelifeng and Huishu Wuzong, even the motionless Xin Yuzhongtong and Wang Yan on the summit of the mountain sucked in a deep breath. Duan Wuji was already doing his utmost to avoid being seduced by Wang Chong and falling into the same predicament. All the commanders of the White Stone Legion were also doing their utmost to maintain order, but in the blink of an eye, the entire White Stone Legion was once more being played around in the palm of Wang Chong's hand. Hiss, this kid. Duan Wuji is simply not his match. He's completely being played around in the palm of his hand. At the base of the mountain, in the battle formation, Daluan Ruozhen had at some point stopped gently waving the fan in his hand. The corners of his mouth, which had always been calm and carefree, slowly tightened into a solemn expression. I'm afraid I've underestimated this kid. This was the only thought in Daluan Ruozhen's mind at this moment. All of Wang Chang's previous battles were meaningless to Daluan Ruozhen, because he had never seen them at all. What he had really seen were the 3 battles between Wang Chong and the White Stone Legion. The first 2 battles did not leave too deep an impression on Daluan Ruozhen. At most, he discovered that Wang Chong had some talent. But when it came to the 3rd time, when it was the battle before his eyes, the feeling was completely different. No matter whether Duan Wuji was willing or not, no matter how hard the White Stone Legion generals worked, no matter how good their teamwork was, no matter how much the White Stone Legion had gone through, in front of the youth called Wang Chong at the top of the mountain, it was not worth mentioning at all. A casual and simple order from Wang Chong had rendered Duan Wuji and the White Stone Legion generals' efforts to naught. No matter how much vigilance and preparation the White Stone Legion soldiers had in their hearts, in front of the Annam Protectorate, they were completely unable to resist and once again fell into a trap. What a terrifying attainment in the art of war! This youth called Wang Chong is probably even more troublesome than we imagined. He will become the greatest obstacle for our Uzan Empire in the southwest. As this thought flashed through his mind, Daluan Ruozhen's brows suddenly furrowed deeply. He never frowned easily, but now, everything had changed. Chapter 568. Thump thump thump. While Daluan Ruozhen, Huishu Wuzong, and the others were still in shock at the tactics and strategies displayed by the Tang troops on the summit, Wang Chang's tactics had already produced an immediate effect. Thump thump thump. Dense ranks of Tang troops charged down from the summit. The scene of harvesting like wheat once more appeared. One after another, the soldiers of the White Stone Legion screamed as they fell to the spears of the Annam Protectorate. Kill! Don't be afraid of them. The eyes of some of the valiant White Stone Legion soldiers turned blood-red as they roared and attempted to charge forward, fighting for their lives with the soldiers of the Annam Protectorate. But in a flash of light, swoosh swoosh swoosh. Sabers and swords stabbed at them from all sides, stabbing through their chests and emerging from their backs. In the blink of an eye, these fearless Whitestone Corps soldiers dropped to the ground, their eyes wide open. This shouldn't be happening. When these warriors of the White Stone Legion fell at the last moment, their hearts were filled with a deep sense of unwillingness. On the shores of Irai, they had killed more than one elite of the Tang dynasty's Annam Protectorate. On the bodies of these fallen Annam Protectorate elites, they had built up a powerful self-confidence. The White Stone Legion was not the slightest bit weaker than the Annam Protectorate. No. It far surpassed them. But no one could understand why things had turned out this way in the blink of an eye. This battle had been fought in a complete mess. Although they had seen everything clearly, they had no idea what had happened when they were retreating. We clearly had the advantage, so why did things suddenly turn out like this? As these thoughts flashed through their minds, the minds of these warriors of the White Stone Legion went black, and then they knew nothing else. Thump thump thump. Countless corpses covered the surface of the mountain like a sea. This time, the number of White Stone Legion soldiers who died was much higher than the last time, and the speed of the deaths was incomparably fast. When the number of people involved in a war reached the level of more than 10,000, the number of people dying in a breath's time was always beyond imagination. Warning: the number of Annan Protectorate Army soldiers killed in battle is 1021. The obliteration line has been lowered further. On the mountaintop, a series of familiar voices poured down from his mind like a waterfall. When he heard these voices, Brain Wang stood on the mountaintop, his long hair and robes fluttering in the wind. A smile appeared on his face. The White Stone Legion only has 80,000 soldiers left. The army of the Mengshi Zhao Empire was very similar to the army of the Tang dynasty. It was primarily infantry, and of all the legions, the shield-like soldiers of the White Stone Legion would always stand on the very front lines of the battlefield. Without the protection of the White Stone Legion, the threat that the Mengshi Zhao Empire posed to the Tang dynasty would be greatly reduced. The Tang dynasty was famed throughout the world for the quality of its equipment, and all its soldiers were armed to the teeth. Without the existence of the White Stone Legion, the Tang dynasty's superiority in equipment would be able to be quickly displayed. 1021 soldiers have died, a casualty ratio of nearly 20 to 1. Not bad. If this ratio can be maintained, the 100,000 soldiers of the Tang dynasty will be able to wipe out the 500,000 soldiers of the Mengshi, Yusang army. Wang Chong inwardly sneered. When it came to those ambitious wolves who coveted the Central Plains, coveted the Tang dynasty, only by teaching them a harsh lesson would they understand what people and what things could not be offended or coveted. Retreat! 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 On the mountaintop, everyone was in a panic. At the start, the 8,000-some casualties hadn't meant much, but now that the death toll had reached 20,000 and was still rising, everything changed. 20,000 out of 100,000 soldiers was equivalent to 1 out of every 5 being killed. The number of corpses scattered across the mountain was not something that could be ignored. Hurry and retreat. Damn it! Just what did these scoundrels do? 1 wave, 2 waves, 3 waves, after being defeated 3 times by the Tang army using the same method, all the commanders of the White Stone Legion were terrified. They had completely understood their strategy, understood their intentions, but they had been utterly unable to stop themselves from being defeated by the same simple strategy. Bastard! Duan Wuji was both shocked and infuriated. The Medicine King behind him and the halo of giant strength of the thorns at his feet were pushed to their limits. Boom boom boom. Wave after wave of stellar energy rumbled toward Zhao Wujiang. That sharp sword that could cut a hair was also swung to its limits by Duan Wuji, a storm of attacks raining down on Zhao Wujiang. It's useless. A bone-chilling voice came from the other side. Zhao Wujiang's deep gaze was fixed on Duan Wuzong. He had long since seen through the initiative and clearly understood what Duan Wuzong meant. Isn't it too late to escape me now? Bang! Zhao Wujiang stamped his right foot on the solid ground and charged forward like a god of war. His long saber fiercely chopped down at Duan Wuzong with the power to split the sky. The two of them once again engaged in a fierce battle. No matter how much Duan Wuji wanted to retreat, no matter how hard he tried to escape from Zhao Wujiang, he could not succeed. Bastard, you madman! Duan Wuji was furious. The losses of the White Stone Legion had left him bleeding. He had personally trained every soldier, and he had poured a great deal of blood and sweat into this White Stone Legion. Although the White Stone Legion had the numerical advantage, it was completely toyed around in the hands of the Tang dynasty. Wave after wave of White Stone Legion soldiers had died on the slope before they could even display their strength. Although the leading generals had tried their best to restrain the army and reorganize the formation, in the face of the Tang dynasty's strategy, all their efforts were in vain. Ha ha ha, Duan Wuji, I know that you have been learning from the Tang dynasty, and I have always known that you want to surpass the Tang dynasty and surpass me. Mengshi Zhao has hidden his ambition. He has helped Mengshi Zhao so much in the Tang dynasty, from the military to farming, from Confucianism to silkworm weaving, and after all these, he still wants to touch the Tang dynasty. It is despicable and hateful. But Duan Wuji, Meng Shizhao will not succeed in the end, and you will not succeed in the end. Do you know why? Do you know where the gap between us is? Looking at the anxious face of Duan Wuji, who wanted to leave and tried his best, but could not get rid of him completely, at this moment, Zhao Wujiang only felt very happy in his heart. So many of his colleagues had died on the banks of Irai, which made Zhao Wujiang's heart ache. He had once thought that it was his responsibility. Because of this, he deeply blamed himself. But now, seeing those Meng Shizhao's people who had killed the Annam Protectorate on the banks of Irai fall one after another, and seeing Duan Wuji's twisted and furious face, Zhao Wujiang only felt very happy in his heart. Zhao Wujiang, you're bullshitting. Duan Wuji roared angrily. His eyes were red and bloodshot. Ha ha ha, Duan Wuji, you don't want to hear it, but I want to say it. Do you know why Meng Shizhao and Jelifeng can never succeed? Do you know why you and your White Stone Legion can never compare to the Annam Protectorate? Because of us, because of the great Tang, we have far more talents than you can imagine. Talented generals, talented ministers, talented officials. These people might not appear in the same place for a while or even for a very long time, and you might not even know of their existence. But as long as the empire is in trouble, as long as the empire needs them, they will descend from the sky, one after the other, and appear in front of you in an endless stream. You think that it's enough to surpass me? Ha ha ha, Duan Wuji, you're too naive. Although I am a high-ranking general of the Annam Protectorate, I am nothing in the Tang dynasty. There are hundreds and thousands of people who surpass Zhao Wujiang, whether it is in cultivation or military attainments, and it is not just a small number. In the end, I, Zhao Wujiang, am just a nobody. Do you know who was the real commander of this war and the person who defeated you? It was a 17-year-old youth, a 17-year-old youth. Duan Wuji, can you imagine? An ordinary 17-year-old youth was able to beat all of you into a complete rout, able to toy with the hundreds of thousands of soldiers of your Mengshi, Yusang coalition in the palm of his hand. Bullshit. Duan Wuji finally couldn't help but curse. Although he knew that Zhao Wujiang was intentionally provoking him, Duan Wuji still couldn't suppress his anger. Defeating the Tang dynasty, reviving the sixth Zhao of Irai, spreading the name of the Mengshi Zhao Empire to the entire continent, planting the banner of Irai throughout the 9 continents, this was not the dream of Emperor Jelifeng alone. It was the dream of millions of Mengshi Zhao people and Mengshi Zhao Great General. Great General Duan Gechuan, Crown Prince Fenjie, Duan Wuji, the White Elephant Corps, the Irai Corps, and all the other generals, every Mengshi Zhao general had this intense desire and dream buried deep within their hearts. Thus, this war had never been the dream of Emperor Jelifeng alone. This war had never been initiated by him alone. This was the long-cherished wish of all the people of Mengshi Zhao. As long as the Tang dynasty remained on the shores of the Irai, as long as Mengshi Zhao remained a vassal of the Tang dynasty and had not yet surpassed the Tang dynasty, generals like him would continue to appear. Duan Wuji could tolerate Zhao Wujiang's insults, but he could not tolerate Zhao Wujiang's slander of his dream. Swish. Just when Duan Wuji was at his most agitated and enraged, swish. A blood-colored longsword surged with raging flames. Like a white steed galloping through a gap, it grew larger and larger. With a swish, it pierced through Duan Wuji's stellar energy and pierced deep into his shoulder blade. With a squelch, the bright red tip of the sword emerged from Duan Wuji's back. Ah! With a shrill scream, Zhao Wujiang's tyrannical, swift, and destructive stellar energy transformed into thousands of threads that pierced through his shoulder blade and into Duan Wuji's body, penetrating his meridians. All his rage was instantly extinguished. Zhao Wujiang pressed forward and slammed a palm into Duan Wuji's chest. Boom! Under the gazes of tens of thousands of people, Duan Wuji's body curled up into a ball and spun like a kite with its string cut. General. Chapter 569. Time seemed to have slowed down countless times at this moment. Countless pairs of eyes followed Duan Wuxi's figure as he moved in the void. Even Wang Chong, who was standing at the top of the mountain, couldn't help but feel his eyelids twitch. Zhao Wujiang, a hint of surprise flashed in the depths of Wang Chong's eyes. Duan Wuxi was definitely not a weakling. A person who could lead the White Stone Legion to rise suddenly and become one of the strongest legions in Mengshi Zhao, defeating the Annam Protectorate by the Chaotic Sea, and making a name for himself with the Annam Protectorate was definitely not a weakling. In fact, in the history that Wang Chong knew, Duan Wuxi was a fierce general of Mengshi Zhao, and his reputation was like the sun in the sky. In fact, he actually surpassed Zhao Wujiang. Wang Chong originally thought that Zhao Wujiang could resist Duan Wuxi and render him unable to play a role, which was already quite good. He hadn't expected that Zhao Wujiang would be able to completely block Duan Wuzong and even injure him with a single blow, sending him flying. In terms of strength, he completely overwhelmed Duan Wuxi. Boom! Duan Wuxi's figure fell from the sky and landed heavily on the ground like a cannonball. Where Duan Wuxi's back landed, the ground instantly collapsed like a spider web. Billowing smoke and dust soared into the sky and instantly covered the ground. General! General! All the soldiers of the White Stone Legion in the surroundings were all pale with fright, and they all swarmed away like clouds. Duan Wuxi was the soul of the White Stone Legion. For the entire White Stone Legion, if anything happened to Duan Wuxi, it would definitely be an earth-shattering nightmare. The White Stone Legion has lost. Wang Chong looked down from above. A cold light flashed in the depths of his eyes when he saw this scene. It wasn't that a general couldn't take the lead and lead the army into battle, but that would be too risky. If one wanted to set an example for others and take the lead, one must first be unbelievably strong. If they weren't strong enough, like Duan Wuxi, and something happened to them, then the morale of the army would instantly collapse. A general who took the lead could easily raise the morale of the army, but he could also cause the morale of the army to plummet due to his own mistakes. Perhaps Duan Wuxi himself did not realize that the morale of the White Stone Legion had collapsed. This is what it means to succeed and fail because of Xiao He. Wang Chong held his hands behind his back as he looked at the place where the smoke and dust were rising from the foot of the mountain. Morale was never something illusory. When an ordinary soldier wanted to go all out and fight with you, it was completely different from when he was timid and only wanted to escape. If it was expressed in terms of morale, then the former was 100%, while the latter had fallen to 0. On the battlefield, morale was always one of the core factors that determined the victory or defeat of an army. Protect the general. You guys lead the general to retreat first. I'll hold them off. Brothers, the general treats us like brothers. No matter what, we can't let anything happen to the general. Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. The general has treated us well. Now is the time to repay the general. Rumble. Without waiting for Zhao Wujiang to continue his pursuit, countless soldiers of the White Stone Legion rushed toward Zhao Wujiang without any regard for their lives. No matter how rotten and corrupt an army was, it would never lack loyal and devoted subordinates. As the commander of the White Stone Legion, Duan Wuxi had countless elite soldiers under his command, and there was no lack of such subordinates. Bang, bang, bang. The huge halo of thorns outside Zhao Wujiang's body rumbled, and the surging stellar energy shattered mountains, sending the White Stone Legion soldiers flying. Before these White Stone Legion soldiers could even land on the ground, they were already corpses. But even so, there were still fearless experts rushing over, frantically blocking Zhao Wujiang's path. Kill! Kill Duan Wuxi! Don't run, Duan Wuxi! Kill these rebels and open the way for General Zhao. Brothers, go! The time for revenge has come. Don't run, Duan Wuxi! Duan Wuxi had many loyal personal guards, and on Zhao Wujiang's side, there were also many capable and brave subordinates. On the hillside, when the elites of the White Stone Legion rushed over, Zhao Wujiang's subordinates also rushed forward to meet them. Both sides were fearless, and the grudge between Zhao Wujiang and Duan Wuji, as well as the hatred between the Anam Protectorate and the White Stone Legion, was enough to make the two groups fight to the death. Boom, boom, boom. Wave after wave of energy swept in all directions. The two groups of elites were like a meat grinder, fighting each other. On the other side, a group of core members of the White Stone Legion was shocked to see this scene. They carried Duan Wuji and frantically fled down the hill. Bang, bang. Zhao Wujiang's stellar energy vibrated, sending more than 10 waves of White Stone Legion elites flying like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. But in the end, he could not help but sigh. What a pity, that bastard Duan Wuji is not fated to die in the end. Even though the Anam Protectorate also had many experts, Zhao Wujiang was still one step behind. The White Stone Legion's frenzied interception finally allowed Duan Wuji to escape. Retreat! Retreat quickly! With Duan Wuji's defeat, the Anam Protectorate's momentum rose, and the White Stone Legion collapsed like a landslide. This was even more severe. Unlike the previous time, the White Stone Legion was truly defeated this time. Humph, want to leave? Do you think it's that easy? At the peak of the mountain, the wind was howling. Wang Chong stood at the top of the mountain, overseeing the entire situation. His eyes were on all sides, and his ears were on all sides. How could he let them retreat so easily? With a wave of his hand, the entire battlefield changed. Countless Anam Protectorate soldiers covered the sky and the earth, and once again, the two sides were entangled. When the enemy advances, I retreat. When the enemy retreats, I advance. When the enemy attacks, I defend. When the enemy defends, I attack. Wang Chong was only using some simple military tactics, but it was enough to make the complacent and ambitious White Stone Legion play around in the palm of his hand. Kill! Countless Anam Protectorate soldiers covered the sky and the earth, howling as they charged down from the mountain. The long-term training of the Anam Protectorate revealed itself at this moment. Even in the midst of sprinting and charging, the Anam Protectorate soldiers still maintained a tight formation and tacit cooperation. 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, layer by layer, the White Stone Legion soldiers kept slowing down as they were pinned down by the Anam Protectorate at the back. Like folding a paper fan, under the strategy of the Anam Protectorate, the number of White Stone Legion soldiers who were pinned down and unable to escape increased from 10,000 to 20,000, 20,000 to 30,000, and finally reached more than 40,000. As long as the White Stone Legion dared to not resist and blindly escape, then these people would all be killed, and they would die very quickly. Selling your back to the enemy, there was no faster way to die than this. However, if the White Stone Legion turned around to resist, they would once again fall into Wang Chong's rhythm of, when the enemy advances, I retreat. When the enemy retreats, I advance. When the enemy attacks, I defend. When the enemy defends, I attack. This was another kind of slow death. And in the end, the number of casualties would only increase. Congratulations to user for killing 30,000 soldiers of the Mengshi Zhao army. The Stone of Destiny's familiar voice once more resounded in his mind. As Wang Chong looked down the mountain, a fierce light flitted through his eyes. We'll die if we advance, and we'll die if we retreat. Now, it's up to you to choose. As this thought flitted through Wang Chong's mind, he stood motionless on the summit, his face cold and aloof. It was like he was standing in a different dimension. The choice was now in the hands of the Mengshi Zhao, Yusang army. Jiao Sero, it's your turn. At the base of the mountain, Daluan Ruozhen suddenly spoke in Uzhen. This, Jiao Sero hesitated for a moment and subconsciously turned his head to look at General Huishu Wuzong. Although the highest leader of the Uzhen Gari royal lineage was Prime Minister Daluan Ruozhen, the real military commander was General Huishu Wuzong. Moreover, although everyone knew that the Prime Minister was very intelligent, that was only in terms of strategy. In terms of actual military strategy and command, the Prime Minister was actually not that experienced. Didn't you hear what the Prime Minister said? Go. Wuxia Wuzong said lightly and waved his hand, his face expressionless. Yes, I'll go now. Jiao Sero made up his mind. He quickly bowed and turned to leave. Wait. Break through from the northeast corner. Wuxia Wuzong suddenly stopped Jiao Sero. Yes, my lord. Jiao Sero was greatly encouraged and his footsteps quickened. The Prime Minister is worried about Meng Shizhao. Once Jiao Sero had left, Wuxia Wuzong suddenly turned to Daluan Ruozhen, still speaking in Uzhen as if no one else was present. Only he knew that what Daluan Ruozhen had said just now was not an order, but a statement of his attitude. An attitude that indicated that the Uzhen alliance should take action. Yes. Daluan Ruozhen nodded, a hint of worry in his eyes. That brat is probably even more formidable than we imagined. If Meng Shizhao's forces are defeated too badly and suffer too many casualties, it will be disadvantageous to us. Morale is a very subtle thing. In addition, although Jelifeng hasn't said anything, if we ignore him, he will probably hold a grudge against us in the future. This won't be very good for the Mengshi-Yusang alliance. After all, we will need their help in many areas in the future. Since that's the case, let's just make our move. Wuxia Wuzong indifferently said, his face unperturbed. Wuxia, you've been in the army for much longer than I have. I heard that before you were made a general, you served under the command of the White Buddha Great General. Other than Zhangqiu Jianxiong, you should have interacted with other generals of the Central Plains. Tell me the truth, have you ever seen such a strange way of fighting before? Wang Chang's tactics were extremely bizarre. They were repeated over and over again, like maggots in the bone. You retreated and I advanced, you advanced and I retreated. His every move could be clearly seen by those outside. Even the White Stone Legion knew what he would do next, but they still fell for his tricks. Most frightening of all was that Duan Wuji's White Stone Legion could not retreat even if they wanted to. If Uzhen's men did not intervene, the White Stone Legion would not have suffered 40 or 50,000 casualties, but a complete wipeout. Most people probably didn't realize this, not even Zhou No. A ripple finally appeared on Wuxia Wuzong's calm face, followed by a long silence. After being locked in a stalemate with the tiger of the Tang dynasty, Zhangqiu Jianxiong, for decades, Wuxia Wuzong was already in existence in the southwest that could shake 3 empires. And Daluan Ruozhen's intelligence was as deep as the sea, an existence that all sides, including Zhangqiu Jianxiong, feared. Chapter 570. Damn it! At the northeast corner of the mountain, crowds were surging. Jiao Sero was leading an army of Uzhen cavalry as he looked up at the densely packed steel walls that resembled fish scales. He felt his scalp going numb. This brat is completely targeting our Uzhen. The infantrymen of Meng Shizhao like Duan Wuji might not be able to feel it, but as the commander of the cavalry, Jiao Sero could tell that Wang Chang's defenses were completely targeted at Uzhen. Where did this brat come from? This was the third time Jiao Sero was about to fight with Wang Chong. The first time was when they were pursuing Wang Yan and part of the Annam Protectorate. The second time was when they were about to rendezvous with General Wuxia Wuzong. This was the third time. In the history of Meng Shizhao, there have been some powerful opponents. For example, Gishu Han of the Longxi region of the Tang dynasty was an opponent that the Uzhen was extremely wary of. But to be honest, after 2 consecutive defeats, Jiao Sero would have had the urge to turn tail and run when he saw the densely packed steel walls at the top of the mountain. If it wasn't for the general's order, he would have turned tail and run. This mountain was simply hell for a cavalry. Jiao Sero even suspected that the reason why the general and the prime minister allowed Meng Shizhao to take the lead was not as simple as making use of them. This damnable kid. If I get my hands on him, I'll definitely tear him to pieces. Giaciluo fiercely raised his head and stared at that thin and weak figure on the distant summit. That figure, which didn't look very tall or burly, seemed to contain a power that made everyone tremble in fear. Even though everyone else was deceived, Jiao Sero knew that the one commanding this battle, including the battle with Duan Wuxi, wasn't any other general of the Tang dynasty. It wasn't Wang Yan, Xianyu Zhongtong, or Zhao Wujiang. It was the mysterious young man on the mountain peak. The general's judgment is correct. Among the 4 areas on the mountain peak, only the northeast corner is the easiest to break through. Jiao Sero looked up at the mountain peak and thought. The entire mountain peak was filled with the soldiers of the White Stone Legion who were attracted by the Annam Protectorate. Of course, the northeast corner was the weakest and the easiest path for Uzun's army. Of course, there was actually a better path on the mountain. However, Giaciluo glanced at the nearby passage that was 10 some zhang wide, his gaze sweeping over the hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions, of caltrops of various sizes, and he felt a chill in his heart. This was a path of death for cavalrymen. No cavalryman could step on the caltrops that were as big as millstones and as small as dates to charge up the mountain. Even if they were to clear them one by one, it would take at least several months to clear out such a large number of caltrops. Not to mention, Wang Chong had arranged groups of ballistine sharpshooters at the end of the path. The arrows were all aimed at the foot of the mountain. Anyone who appeared on this path would be sending themselves to the feet of the god of death. Crack! Crack! Veins popped out on his forehead, but Jiao Sero soon calmed down. Everyone, listen up. Follow me immediately. Jiao Sero suddenly swung the halberd in his hand. In the next moment, Nei's warhorse neighed. Jiao Sero and his horse became one and suddenly leaped up the mountain. Behind him, the black and red cloak fluttered in the air and flashed fiercely. Then, it quickly disappeared in the direction of the mountain. Hiya! Behind Jiao Sero, tens of thousands of Uzun soldiers followed Jiao Sero like a school of carps in the river. They charged up the mountain from the foot of the mountain. All the cavalrymen were skilled with bows and horses. They passed through the steel walls as if there was no one there and charged toward the Annam Protectorate. Kid, if you think these iron lumps can stop us, then you are gravely mistaken. In this world, there is nothing that can completely stop us, the Uzun. Jiao Sero clenched his teeth. His body leaned against the back of the tall and strong Highland steed, and he secretly swore in his heart. The cavalrymen of the grassland were skilled in horsemanship since they were young. The steel walls that Wang Chong set up on the surface of the mountain could indeed obstruct them, but it was impossible for them to completely stop the Uzun. Everyone, follow up. Let us kill the Tang people and defeat them. Jiao Sero raised the halberd in his hand and shouted loudly. Roar! Behind him, the cavalrymen of the Uzun army responded with a thunderous roar. Looking down from the sky, one could see huge greenish-black dragons moving back and forth along the gaps of the steel walls, twisting and turning as if they were migrating at the bottom of a river. Since it was impossible to charge in a straight line, the cavalrymen would charge in a roundabout way. This was the method that Jiao Sero thought of to break through the steel walls set up by Wang Chong. Humph, they took the bait. On the top of the mountain, Wang Chong kept his eyes and ears open. When he saw Jiao Sero and the Uzun army charging in a roundabout way from the northeast corner, a cold glint flashed across his eyes. They really broke through from the northeast corner. Huishu Wuzong, you have indeed read many military books from the Central Plains. Wang Chong sneered in his heart. There had long been rumors that Huishu Wuzong had obtained many military books from Daluan Ruozhen. Therefore, he knew the military styles of the generals of the Central Plains like the back of his hand, and could easily defeat them. However, since Huishu Wuzong had always commanded pure cavalrymen, which was completely different from the Central Plains, which was mainly infantrymen, there was no way to verify this. However, Wang Chong had only casually tested it, and he immediately found out that Wuxia Wuzong had not only read the military books from the Central Plains, but also that it was indeed true. There was no way the rumors were false. Using the military books from the Central Plains to deal with the generals of the Central Plains, Wuxia Wuzong, how dare you think of something like this? Jiao Sero, since you're here, don't even think about leaving. I've prepared a great gift for you. If Jiao Sero saw Wang Chong's expression at this moment, he would definitely be terrified. General Luo. Here. As Wang Chong's figure appeared, a dark-skinned general wearing black armor and a black cloak walked out from behind Wang Chong. He had a dignified and cold expression, and he was filled with an iron will. Young master, do you have any orders for me to transfer? I'm willing to go at any time. That general's face was pitch black, and it looked like it was cast in silver. His every movement revealed a powerful will, and he was completely different from the other generals. Luoji, nicknamed Iron Spear Luo, was one of the high-ranking generals of the Anan Protectorate, and his standing wasn't beneath that of Zhao Wujiang. However, unlike Zhao Wujiang, who was close to Xian Yuzhongtong, Luoji had never been on good terms with Xian Yuzhongtong. Even though they both served under Zhangqiu Jianxiong, Luoji had never gotten along with Xian Yuzhongtong. It wasn't just because Luoji was loyal to Zhangqiu Jianxiong. More importantly, Luoji had always believed that only Zhangqiu Jianxiong was qualified to assume the position of Anan Protector General. Even though Xian Yuzhongtong was the candidate appointed by Zhangqiu Jianxiong before he was appointed, he wasn't capable enough to assume the position. The southwest bordered Mengshi Zhao and Uzan, and it was a place where three empires intersected. The situation was complicated, and it wasn't inferior to that of the western regions or Annong. Without a sufficiently powerful individual to guard the area, it was easy for problems to arise. And the subsequent developments had confirmed Luoji's conjecture. When Lion City was breaking out of the encirclement, Luoji immediately split with Xian Yuzhongtong and chose to lead a portion of the Anan Protectorate's army to follow Wang Yan. In Luoji's view, at least in terms of capability, the Wang clan's father and son were much more open-minded than Xian Yuzhongtong. At the very least, they had always known what to do in this war. They wouldn't be like Xian Yuzhongtong, leading the army into danger. He's indeed a valiant general. Wang Chong's eyes were sharp, and when he saw Luoji walking out from the back, he nodded his head in approval. The reason why he chose Luoji was very simple. Luoji was adept at using a spear, and his attacks were extremely powerful. On the summit last time, Wang Chong had realized that when his father had arrived with the Anan Protectorate army officers, Jia Siluo had feared no one except the commander of the Anan Protectorate army, Luo Ji, who had been the last to arrive. Wang Chong had realized that Jia Siluo was extremely apprehensive of him. During the battle, he almost completely avoided Luoji. Not long after Luoji arrived, he hurriedly left. When Wang Chong saw this scene, he sharply noticed that Jiao Sero's Zifidon had an extremely strong defense, but Luoji's terrifying spear skills were precisely the bane of his Zifidon. This was also one of the main reasons why Jiao Sero avoided him. However, Jiao Sero, it won't be so easy for you to leave this time. The corner of Wang Chong's mouth revealed a trace of a cold smile. Zhang Long, Zhao Hu, Chen Qiong, Li Ji, Fong Tang, Zhou Han. Yes, sir. Su Shiping, Su Onduan. Yes, sir. Go with General Luo. You know what to do, right? Yes, sir. Wang Chong waved his sleeves, and the 6 Black Dragon Gang elites that Li Sai had sent along with Su Shiping and Su Onduan immediately left to carry out the order. Luoji's strength was enough to pose a great threat to Jiao Sero, but it was far from fatal. These 6 Black Dragon Gang elites, Su Shiping and Su Onduan, were the best assistants that Wang Chong had specially prepared for Luoji. General Luo, wait a moment. Just as Luoji was about to descend the mountain, Wang Chong pondered for a moment and suddenly took out a spear barrel from his waist. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed it over. If we want to deal with Jiao Sero, we can't do without this. Take it. Even with Luoji's maturity and composure, he couldn't help but be moved by the retractable spear barrel. More importantly, the spear Wang Chong had given him was definitely no ordinary spear. There was only one thing that Luoji could think of. Wuxia steel weapon. Thank you, Gongzi. Luoji turned around. Even though his heart was in turmoil, his face remained calm and steady, without much of an expression on it. Go. Wang Chong smiled and didn't say anything else. This retractable spear barrel was a replica of Marchioness Yi's weapon. In truth, the material used to forge the spear barrel wasn't too high. It was made out of top-notch superior steel, mixed with the crushed metal from overseas, and inscribed with a large number of toughening inscriptions. The true crux of the spear was the spearhead. There was simply too little Wuxia steel in stock. That was why Wang Chong thought of crafting a spearhead made of Wuxia steel to conserve materials. Hom Long Long. Regardless of what Wang Chong was thinking, after obtaining the Wuxia steel spear from Wang Chong, Luoji was like a tiger that had grown wings. Riding on a massive black steed, he kicked up a cloud of dust and charged down the mountain toward Jiao Sero. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.